Guys, subscribe to my Boosty because there is a lot of lemon and hint content link in the description.
Now let's dive into the world. He kept on gasping as the number of men around him were either ferried by ambulances, just as tired as he, or dead. All around, carcasses of oddly large animals laid against the broken street, all by their hands. Bloody but alive, the man at the middle of it all, with the most kills alongside another, hit his rear as he looked down at his hand that glowed a wicked blue. What the hell is happening? Another man shouted into the sky as more of these odd occurrences dotted the street. People screaming. The bodies of people and monsters littering the ground. And those who stood atop it all, wielding power of all sorts that were esoteric in nature and protecting the populace. This was the day of the beginning of hunters. 3 years later. He ran his hand through his hair. 3 years already, huh? He blinked as he looked around from his place on a park bench. He was a man of decent stature, nowadays, being 6 feet and an extra inch. Bearing spiky black hair, fair skin, and black eyes, he ran one of his fingers over an old scar on his palm. Wearing some light clothes, a tight dark blue t-shirt, black sweatpants, and some black martial artist flats, he sighed. 3 years since we were separated. 3 years since the gates arrived. 3 years since he disappeared. Hyung Nim, came a voice that broke him out of his reverie. Hyung Nim, a happy woman said as she hurried over and smiled. Bearing similar features to the man on the bench. Her hair was long and smooth to the point that it reached below her rear if it weren't in her usual ponytail. Wearing a simple white shirt, light blue track pants, and a pair of white and blue running shoes, the man got up from his seat. Kyung Hai, he smiled before chuckling as the woman, his twin sister, hugged him. It's been some time, he said. Ki Jin no. Ah, right, she smiled at him as he rubbed her back. It's Abido now, isn't it? Kyung Hai smiled happily for him as she held him at arm's length. You really went and changed your name, she said softly. You know how it was with our house, he said with a soft look. Besides, it's over, Abido told her, confusing her. What? I handled it. Please, let's just be happy about me moving into the neighborhood. The way the woman's jaw dropped, but her face lit up ignited that new nature Abido Uchiha had gained in this second life. He ruffled her hair and she laughed as she hugged him again. To protect his family, even just his sister's own, that he cherished amongst all else. Come on, we'll talk as we exercise. They took off in a small jog afterward, a light speed that gave them space to move and speak. So, how have Jin Ah and Jin Woo been? They should be in school right now, right? Abido asked Kyung as she hummed. They're growing well, even with Il Hwan's disappearance. I'm doing my best to ensure they can grow up happy, warm, and fed. Thanks, by the way. I know we can seem a bit burdensome. Kyung blushed a bit even as Abido pat her back. I don't think you're like that, not one bit. You're my true family, and any others you become happy with will become part of that, too. Family takes care of each other, and I plan to stick to that. The woman shot him a look as they rounded a corner and kept going. How? She asked him, confused. Abido raised a brow. How are you not married by now? Abido stumbled a bit but recovered with a loud hum. Kyung Hai, please, my life's not been acceptable before this to worry about those kinds of things, he said quickly as she pouted at him. Besides, it's not crossed my mind. Not a lot. Hyung Nim, you're 30, she told him with a flat look as Abido's brow began to twitch. You're in good shape. You're a hunter, too, Kyung muttered softly. Abido's face grew solemn before his eyes grew determined. I'll find him, he told her, surprising his sister who blushed and looked down. I've been looking up all the details of the dungeon he disappeared into. You know how my power works, Abido smiled for her as she nodded quickly, looking a good bit reinvigorated. I know that string is still there and it's never stopped moving. He's alive and surviving pretty well, but we either have to wait for another gate to open or I need to find a way to go into the one he was at. You're so amazing, she said to him with a look he smiled bashfully at. Don't they only see you as a C-rank hunter, Abido? They do, and that's fine. I've already transferred over to this branch while keeping as much of my skill hidden as possible. Kyung Hai blinked in confusion. I wonder, she thought as they sped up a bit. How strong is he really? Her brother had always been a powerful individual in her mind. his maturity, intelligence, good looks even if he didn't like to recognize it, and his creativity had never left her unamazed. Yet, the man's magical level only read as a C rank for his occupation as a hunter. Kyung didn't know how they scaled people like him, but she felt like it should have taken experience and understanding of his skills into account, especially with their old family's involvement. The two of them made it to her daughter's elementary school. "It's been so long since I've had a race with you," Kyung grinned as Obaido chuckled, the two wiping their foreheads with some hand towels he'd bought before they got here. "And you're so dang athletic. Remind me, how are you single?" she asked with a look of smug and yet minor disbelief. Obaido grinned nervously as they waited outside the gates, the stream of children coming out looking at the two curiously. "Can we not talk about that?" he pleaded. "Nope. From here on out, hunter or not, I'm finding you a girlfriend, Tilda," she said half-jokingly. "Oh God." "Mom," came the voice of a young girl as she ran out and then right into her mother's stomach. "You're early again," she grinned before noticing Obaido. She tilted her head. "Jin, don't you remember your uncle?" Kyung asked her daughter with a grin as the girl's face went blank while Obaido's sweat dropped. HM, it's fine. You'll have time to get more comfortable with each other since he's now living in Korea." Jin was a short girl with slightly round fair-skinned cheeks, gray eyes, and dark brown, almost black, hair that was tied into a small ponytail. Wearing her school uniform, the girl kept on looking up at Obaido with puffy cheeks. The man crouched to her level. "Good afternoon, Jin, he smiled at her, and the girl puffed out her cheeks more before holding onto her mother's hand and reaching out for his own. Grabbing it a bit, she felt it. "Shushu?" she asked, and he nodded. I didn't know you existed." "That's for a good reason. I'm sorry I've missed many of your birthdays," Obaido smiled at her, and the girl pouted again. "That said, things should be different now, as Kyung-hae explained. I'm living here now. I'm even in a place near your own home," he told them as he stood up, confusing his sister. "You are?" Kyung asked in disbelief. "Where? You never told me." Across the street in the other apartment complex." The woman's jaw dropped again. "Hyung Nim? I'm sorry, I wanted to surprise you all." Getting to her home, Kyung's sweat dropped as Obaido gestured to the literal apartment ahead of her own across the street. "I know you told me, but that's still so ridiculous that it's funny," she chuckled as Jin observed. "So, you'll be coming for my birthday party, right, uncle?" the girl asked and got a hair ruffle for her troubles. "From now on, I'll do my best to try and be a part of your lives, but I've got a mission to do," Obaido smiled knowingly as his sister reciprocated happily. "I hope to give you one of the biggest surprises of your life, one day. I just hope it won't take too long." Jin looked surprised by that. "What is it?" "Not yet," he chuckled as they leaned on the railing ahead of the two's apartment door. "Actually, now that we're here, where's Jinwoo?" "I'm back, Mom," came a young, developing, male voice as a young man crested the last set of steps to the apartment floor. "And I just got who's this?" He was a bit below average height for his age, the young man likely only being 16. Bearing fair skin, a boyish face, gray eyes, and chin-length black hair that fell over his head and hid his ears. Wearing a pair of jeans, sneakers, and a blue hoodie, he looked startled as he hurried up to the trio. "Hyung Nim," Jin greeted cheerfully as the teen blinked before smiling at her. "Good evening, Jin the girl's brother said before focusing back on Obaido. Who are you, sir?" he asked politely. Kyung-hae grinned and Jin-woo looked confused. "Haha, you likely don't remember him, Jin-woo, but this is your uncle. Formerly Kang Peng, he recently changed his name to Obaido Uchiha. He's my brother," she smiled. Jin-woo balked at that, observing Obaido and coming back with one thing. This guy's handsome. Was that the nice side of his gene pool? Was he left with nothing? The boy's sudden sulk got a confused raised brow out of Obaido. Is he all right?" he asked as his sister and Jin snickered. "Jin-woo's been defeated," the girl said, confusing the man further as Jin-woo whined. "Damn it," he wailed. "I'm lost." It was only 4 hours later that the family of 3 entered Obaido's home, the man welcoming them in. "Oh, it's about the same size as our home," Kyung said in surprise. "Wait, right, C-rank hunter? Thanks, Hyung Nim, For all the help over the years, she thanked him from her heart. Obito smiled wholeheartedly as she was soon in his arms and laughing all the while. Always, I look after my family as much as I can, he said as Jinwoo blinked at the two, still in his school clothes. Mom always said she had a brother she cared a lot about, he considered as Jin-ah ran about the living room where the young man saw something curious. Shushu, you work out? The teen asked as he walked over to a corner of the larger-than-usual living room to see weights. Weighted bands, dumbbells, a barbell, a couple odd individual metal bars, and a weighted vest. Jinwoo blinked at it all as Obito nodded, him and Kion coming over. Well, I have to keep myself in tip-top shape, Jinwoo, Obito explained. I'm a hunter, after all, and it's the best way to see how strong I can get. Right, what rank? The boy asked, intrigued. C rank? Jinwoo was impressed by that. You're the same rank Dad was when he went off, he said before trailing off nervously, Jin-ah still moving about and not hearing them. I know, Obito whispered. And, like I told your mother, I'm going to find him, he smiled as the teen's head snapped up in disbelief. What? I'm a mage class hunter. I have skills that can tell me that he's alive and moving. Obito smiled as the younger male's eyes wobbled a bit. He wiped it away before his sister could see. Really? He'd never thought he could hear those words before. His father was alive. Really? And his uncle could find him? A mage class hunter? If that's true, then why are you working out? The boy asked, interest reignited and yet befuddled. I've read up on them a lot, all the different classes. You have a weakness to upfront combat. No, your uncle very much doesn't. Jinwoo, Kyung-hai said after a moment of thought, confusing the boy. What? He didn't understand? I don't follow, Mom. That's the norm amongst all mage hunters. So, Obito asked the boy as he balked. Jinwoo, let me give you a bit of advice. Whether you join this life or not, he kneeled down as the young man's eyes widened. Never allow yourself to fall into some box that tells you what you can or can't. If someone says a mage inherently has bad physical scores, I'll deal with it. I'll expand my senses to block an assassin and protect our healer. I'll raise my power to destroy a tank, and I'll increase my physical skills and abilities to deal with any fighter. I'm not afraid of them, nor will I allow something as ridiculous as a generalization of my abilities make me weak. Jinwoo was floored by the man's words. Can you really do that? Well, in his defense, seeing his uncle's height, the man's broad shoulders and chest, even through his shirt and shorts, Jinwoo had originally thought he was a fighter. At first, he'd never considered the man wasn't due to how he walked. It was another thing he noticed with different classes. The mages and healers didn't walk like fighters, assassins, or tanks. They held a sort of cautious gait. Assassins walked casually without worry, tanks displayed their stature almost subconsciously, and fighters walked like people with pride and humility. They all walked in different ways, and he'd saw a fighter's walk in his uncle's own movements. But if that wasn't the correct assumption, did that mean there were people like that? People who conquered such general weaknesses. Likely, those are the S rank, the top of the top hunters in every country. Chill out, man, your uncle's just a C rank that didn't stop his mind from wandering. Where would the man stand compared to those top hunters? That had been how they'd integrated the man into their family life, and Jinwoo could say that they'd taken a big jump in happiness levels. 3 years later, he'd been out of high school for a year and was left exercising. His uncle had impressed him a lot that day when he'd arrived. To not let himself be weak and fall into boxes, even if Sung Jinwoo realized that might have been a bit tough. Because he had awakened, the phenomenon when someone awoke to the power to fight in raids that sought to explore gates and beat the monsters, but he was weak as hell. E rank, and not exactly the strongest, not even close. He had no special magical skill, even though he was classified as a fighter by his uncle's own words. He had little magical ability to the point of having even less than a normal E rank, 10. That had been his score, and a normal E rank was supposed to have, at a minimum, 70 or higher. But even then, embarrassing as it was, Jinwoo had taken to trying his best to train. His uncle had even told him that if he wanted to actually fight in raids, he'd lend him a few basic weapons he'd made. That had been another thing. His uncle had told him that he worked for the Hunters Guild. one of the 5 big guilds in South Korea. He's so cool, he wanted to cry manly tears. Sure, he's still on standby, but Uncle's gotten the eyes of so many people, it made him want to try harder and harder. So, as he finished his workout in the park, Jin Woo's world began to fall down. His phone rang, and he blinked as he pulled it out and paled. He rushed through the hospital doors as quickly as he could. "Mom?" Jin Woo gasped rapidly before his eyes locked onto a single figure, and he froze. "Mom?" There, asleep on a medical bed, was Kyung-hae. The woman didn't look hurt or ill, not in the least. She was just in a peaceful sleep. "We're sorry," a doctor said as he entered the room, head down as he stood by Jin Woo. The young man hit his knees. "No, why? Not Mom, please," he begged the man as he sighed. "It's another case of eternal slumber." Jin Woo grit his teeth. Eternal slumber, a magical disorder brought about by the invasion of magic beasts entering their world 6 years back and the introduction of gates to humankind. Many said that it was due to the change in the world. Normal people couldn't handle the stresses of the power of the gates that seemed to intertwine with the world at large. "No, I can't lose my mom, too." But then another angle came into place. How do I... There was a ring from his phone, the young man scrambling with wet eyes and a gasping breath to answer. "Uncle, Mom is..." he sniffled with a limp tone. "Jin Woo? I know. They told me." Obaido kissed his teeth over the line, the sound of rushing reaching the young man's ears. "Keep me on the line. I'll be there soon after picking up your sister." "Mr. Uchiha, where are you going?" one of the other hunters asked the man as Obaido dropped off a magical gem. "I need to go," the C-rank said as the young woman there raised a brow at him. Bearing blonde hair in a bob cut, fair skin, and gray eyes, she blinked at him in her white tunic, black pants and boots, and silver corsage plate. "We need to debrief," she told him as the Uchiha closed his eyes before shaking his head. "This is your promotion to leader. Is it so serious?" she asked nervously. Young lady, I don't have the time, I'm sorry." The slightest bit of blue light formed beneath their feet, and he vanished from before her, the young woman's eyes widening before they snapped aside where a small figure disappeared into the distance. "What? Cha Hee-in in full, balked at the absurd rise in speed and sheer jumping power. When did he have such speed? That's not the speed of a C-rank mage," she frowned as she covered her nose. "But his scent is still so weak, ow." Jin Woo had long since moved to his mother's bedside, holding onto the sleeping woman's hand. "You need to understand that it's not a simple process," the doctor spoke with a sigh. "If you were a hunter, we might have been able to..." "I'm a hunter," came a voice from the room's flapping doors, Obaido grunting as Jin Ah sat in his arms, looking pale. "Mom?" the young teen cried out as Obaido put her down before she ran up to Jin Woo and Kyung-hae. "Mom? Mom?" the girl cried out as she pulled on the woman's sheets as if to jostle her awake. "Did you say you were a hunter?" the doctor asked the grimacing Obaido, who closed his eyes with a nod. "Then, I can offer you an idea. The Hunter Association has a big stake in men like you. They'll pay for her medical costs if you're a hunter, sir." "What rank?" "See," Obaido said tersely, the doctor flinching before the hunter grabbed his own face and kissed his teeth. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't mean to scare you." "Please, continue." "A C rank?" Either hunters were scarier than the medical professional remembered, or this man wasn't just a C rank. "Why, yeah, as I said, you can apply for a medical waiver due to your position as awakened." "How does it work?" "You'll be required to clear a quota of gates. It doesn't matter what rank they are, but you have to prove your worth by being part of raiding parties. Basically do what he'd been doing." Obaido was sure he could handle it. "Mom, don't leave us like Dad." His eyes widened as his gaze went to the crying duo, the children leaning over their mother's unconscious body. "I can't leave them alone." "Wait, what?" Cha Hee-in, along with many of the others, balked at Obaido as he smiled sadly. Wait, think this through." "That's enough, Cha Hee-in," a man said from behind the quickly parting crowd, his form cutting through it like a divine figure. "Sir, are you sure of this?" "Yes, Choi Jong-in," Obaido said with a bow towards the, quickly waving it off, younger man. I have to take care of some others now due to an eternal slumber in the family. The young man before him frowned softly at that. Oh. He was a tall, lanky man with fair skin, cleanly kept red hair that swept over the right side, and light gray eyes. Wearing a simple white dress shirt, black slacks, and brown dress shoes, he cupped his chin. The entire area winced at the reveal, much more so after realizing just how serious this was. I understand. Will you still be with the hunters? You're a man of amazing talent, Mr. Uchiha. It'd be hard to imagine the B-Force working without you, Jongin said, mind in a more tattered state. Hyun? He hadn't expected this. The man didn't look downtrodden so much as solemn, the gleam in his eyes still there, but they'd changed. This was likely a big shift in responsibilities. If it'd be no issue, please put me in the cleaning party. The miners gawked. No foolin', one of them, their mining team leader, asked. Not in the least, Yoon-suk. I still need to be considered clearing raids even as the cleanup work. It's part of my new quota, Obaido explained. I don't understand. Wouldn't it be better for you to continue being an active hunter, regardless? Cha-in asked, confused. Nope, I can't put those two into a third loss, Vice Guild Leader. The woman froze before paling harshly, Jong-in frowning deeply at that. That's harsh, but likely an appropriate amount of information to satiate her confusion. We understand. As Guild Master, I've no issue changing your station, Mr. Uchiha. Thank you, I mean it. Returning to his sister's home ended with him sighing as he slowly opened the door and heard no other noises than a TV being on. Damn it, he let out a soft sigh before closing the door behind him, depositing his shoes by the door, and coming in to find a heartbreaking sight in the living room. Jin-woo and Jin-ah asleep together on the couch, tear tracks coming down from their eyes. This isn't going to be easy for them, Obaido feared what would have happened if Jin-woo had been made to go through this all on his own. But I will be here for them, his eyes narrowed. I'll make them some food. Jin-woo awoke from his empty slumber to the head of his also shifting awake sister on his chest and a hollow feeling filling him upon awakening. Mom's gone eternal slumber was not something many considered even curable. Most people died during it, losing an immense amount of life force from the disease if they weren't on life support. Uncle, his eyes widened as he looked away from the TV to the door. Is he? I'm here, a voice said from the kitchen, startling the siblings as they turned their heads to see him turning off the stove. I cooked, come on. It was only then that the smells hit them, the two swallowing at the feeling clashing with their despair. I changed my occupation at the Hunters Guild, Obaido said with a small, closed-eyed smile. I'm not leaving you two alone, not like this. I'll be on the cleanup team from here on out. What? The two stumbled out of their couch and hurried over to the kitchen, the warmth of it, the smells of food, and just another adult being in their home causing more tears to bubble. Shushu SNFF. I know, I miss her immensely already, Obaido said, a single pair of tears falling down from his eyes. She's my twin. Your mother's the only family I've had left for a long time, you too. But then she got married and brought a pair of wonderful children into the world, he grinned for them. I'm not her replacement, neither hers nor your father's, but I can be the uncle I promised her to be. I'm not leaving you two alone, not now, not ever. Jin-ah cried almost immediately as her brother held her close, barely on the verge as Obaido came over. He held the two close and that did it. Sung Jin-woo and Sung Jin-ah broke down one more time that day, embraced warmly by their uncle. The family was fractured, very much so. But damn it, they had someone else still. In the year that passed, several changes had been made. For one, Obaido had officially moved in with them after canceling the lease on his apartment. Jin-ah was entering high school, and Jin-woo had become a hunter in occupation. That last bit had terrified his sister to no end, but Obaido had did his best to assuage her fears by introducing them into a secret their mother had. We trained together often if you'd believe it, Obaido told the two shocked siblings. She likely never told you, but Kyung picked it up almost 7 years ago, and I helped her get better. Your mother was no slouch, you too. She likely could have gone to internationals as a gymnast if she'd wanted. And so, that had started their family training time. where Obaido would lead them through exercise to make them healthier, stronger, more capable of not falling victim to as many physical threats as possible. Jinwoo grunted as he hit the ground again, a wooden knife sinking into the ground beside him. With the three's regular training sessions, Obaido had seen fit to make them clothing for it. A pair of odd, slightly baggy black trousers, thin but durable dark blue tunics, and black gloves covered all three of them as they trained in their preferred footwear. "You good, bro?" Jin-Ah asked from the sideline of the small Obaido-made ring. "Uncle, you're being too rough." "No, wait, it's fine," Jinwoo said with a breath as he sat up before finding Obaido's hand in front of him. Thanks, uncle," he thanked the man as he pulled him up with so much ease. What was he like as a hunter? It had been one of Jinwoo's many regrets for his uncle. The man had explained to them the promotion to team leader he'd have gotten if things hadn't turned out like this. Leading B ranks and A ranks, the thought was almost too much for the now 20-man to wrap his head around. A C rank hunter gaining that much credibility and respect was downright unheard of. The only reason he said downright was because his raiding party over the past year had a man in it, another C rank, who said he had a S rank student. When he'd learned her name, Obaido had informed him that she was his vice guild master. Never before had Jinwoo been more in disbelief than knowing that two C ranks could garner so much respect. It had only made him more determined, though, to keep training, to keep fighting. To not become a burden on his uncle and share the costs for his mother's bills. In the back of his head, Jinwoo hoped he could mix their coverage and get the woman a better room. Maybe there were such things and she could get better care. He didn't know, despite how much research he'd done the past year. "Your brother's a lot tougher than you think, Obaido chuckled as Jinwoo blushed and grumbled. While he doesn't have the natural attribute increases of his designated class, he's got something that can and will take him far." "A moldable body?" Jin-Ah joked as her brother wheezed. "He means spirit," he corrected her, cheeks bright red as she snickered at him. That's not ladylike, Jinna." "Oi, it's Jin-Ah, I'm not an American." He blew a raspberry and chuckled as she squawked at him before turning to face his uncle. Jinwoo blushed at the man's amused look and cleared his throat. "Don't mind her, she's in puberty," he said quickly. "Excuse me, come and say that to my face," Jin-Ah declared dangerously as he laughed nervously. "Nope." Obaido chuckled at the two of them before blinking as his phone rang, the oldest of the three pulling it out and answering the call as Jinwoo raised a brow. "Hello," he greeted as Jin-Ah came over. "Hello, Hyun?" The only people who called him that were Jong-in, he whispered. "Yes, it's me. You said that, of your recent charges, one of them was a hunter, right? Well, we're having a small event with another guild. The White Tigers have a few new B ranks who want to test their mettle, and we accepted. Is he up for it?" "No way," Jin-Ah squealed quietly as she followed behind the sheepish Obaido, and, just as awestruck as her, Jinwoo. "Uncle, we're at your guild, the Hunters." Wearing a simple white shirt, a skin-tight black long sleeve beneath it, and some blue jean shorts with some tennis shoes, she kept looking around at all the high-ranked hunters. Jinwoo, meanwhile, looked at them all with a sort of awe and scrutiny. These are other C, B, and A rank hunters, he considered with interest. Wearing a white hoodie, a light blue sleeveless tunic, and a pair of black pants and sneakers, he couldn't help but compare. The more he looked at them all, his eyes would always snap back to his uncle as he led the way. The man's loosely tied dark blue yukata, baggy dark gray pants, and odd open-toed sandals moved like one of the crowd, not looking bothered or cowed in the slightest no matter who was near him. "Uncle really does belong here," he whispered to his sister, who tilted her head before watching the man's back for a bit and nodding. "He's probably gotten used to it," she told him. "These are still A rankers and stuff, they'd be terrifying to fight." Jin-Ah shivered as Jinwoo nodded. "Ah, welcome," came the voice of Choi Jong-in as he walked up to the three with a smile, a pair of glasses sitting across his nose. "Mr. Uchiha." "Jong-in, did the contacts not work out?" Obaido asked casually, even as his nephew and niece gawked in sheer jaw-dropping shock. "Also, these are my nephew and niece, Jinwoo and Jin-Ah, respectively," he smiled as he folded his arms into his sleeves. "You both, this is one of our guild's 2S rank hunters, Choi Jong-in." The Hunters Guild's guildmaster, he's also a mage class hunter. The revealed ranker bowed to the gawking siblings, Jin Woo's eyes going over the man's lanky body and yet coming away with nothing but strong. This man was a mage. Really? Because Jin Woo didn't think he could ever get the drop on him even if he was a B-rank fighter. Uncle was right, and his own estimations as well. Only those who'd conquered their class's weaknesses could stand at the top. I looked them up, Jong, and thought, so, this is the so-called weakest hunter in the world? It was rather cruel. The boy's records showed him as someone who'd been in a bunch of raiding parties over the past year, even coming out of a few of them as a decent fighter for his rank, but they still labeled him as such. And Hyung is training him? There was room for growth, of course. The young man named Jin Woo had only been a hunter for a year, and yet had done as well as an average E-rank would in their second year. Pleasure to meet you. Our former B-team leader speaks lovingly of his family. The siblings blushed at that, Obaido chuckling without remorse. Of course, he smiled. So, Jong-in, what's all this craziness about? Usually, I know the two guilds will compete, but this is a rare occurrence, Obaido considered as Jong-in nodded before gesturing to the right side. Ah, come along. You too, the Uchiha said to his nephew and niece as he and Jong walked. Whoa, wait up, Jin-ah said as they caught up to the two. And, maybe it's just me, but don't they seem kinda chummy? She whispered to her brother. They did. In fact, the more Jin Woo observed the chatting duo, the more he saw a different scene. Of a younger man showing off to his older brother. Eh? He blinked in disbelief while his sister nudged him for answers. Easy. Look, doesn't he seem like he's showing off to Uncle? Jin Woo whispered to her. She blinked in shock before nodding rapidly as they scrutinized the two some more. Yes, actually, we've been working on that one idea you supported, Jong-in explained as they stopped by a table surrounded by hunters. Though, it's still in its working stages. The corpses of monsters aren't easy to work with, after all. Now, he clapped his hands with a smile, the 8 rings on his fingers gaining Jin Woo's attention. Rings? Wait, didn't I hear about Choi Jong in using those as his staff? Don't only the high-rank mages do that? That was insane but so damn cool. Wait, now that I think about it, his eyes went to his uncle. Everyone, the time has come for us to show off our newest members, the redhead smiled for his guild as Obaido soon found 2 women at his sides. Welcome back, Mr. Uchiha, he greeted him with an observant look while the woman on his other side knocked her knuckles against his bicep. It's been some time and who are these 2? She asked, looking at Jin Woo in a large amount of surprise. Wait, I don't smell a lot coming from him, he blinked in total confusion as Jin Woo cleared his throat and looked away from her. She's so pretty, kind of like that B-rank healer he'd met recently. Li Ju-hee, a woman around his age who'd taken to healing him the most in all of the raids he'd taken part in. Honestly, did all these women need to be so damn pretty? Meanwhile, Obaido raised a brow at the grinning woman on his right. Gina, long time no see, how was your vacation? The man asked cordially with a smile, the woman's grin continuing even as her cheeks colored a bit. Pretty well, thank God for a rank paychecks, she smirked. Gina Acolyte, an American-Korean citizen, was a tall woman, around his height minus an inch, with long thick strawberry blonde hair, fair skin, and red eyes. Bearing a large red cloak with a hood, a black corset brassiere kipao mix, and thigh-high dark brown boots, the woman chuckled. I'm sure you'd love to know. Bite me, Gina, I make fine money, Obaido shot back with a smirk of his own as she chomped her jaws. So you say, but you could have been making more, she told him, brow raised. You're literally one of the best leaders the B team's ever had. Do you realize that? Even among B and A rankers, your experience and observation are way too good. You could have gotten a recommended rank up, my fellow mage. Jin Woo and Jin Ah considered that high praise. Those weren't exactly normal ways to get a higher rank. Most would say that the right way was to go get your magic power rated by the Monitoring Division, the organization under the Hunters Association that handled looking after all hunters. That said, there were small, near impossible, paths to higher ranks. Say, if anyone in S rank recommended you, or if the leader of your guild and 5 rankers spoke up for you, they were rare but rank ups were another path to a better life. Uncle did say he was almost promoted. Jinwoo figured he wasn't that surprised by this word of mouth, while his sister giggled slyly. "What are you up to now?" he whispered. "Duh, look at her," she whispered as he leaned in with he. "She's totally into Uncle," Jin-ah said obliviously as the older two looked at the two mages interact. Obaido's sassy remarks and Gina's smirking rebuttals went back and forth, the two switching the roles pretty easily and quickly. "Is that true?" he whispered in shock. "I guess women do like men like Uncle," Jin-woo admitted bashfully. "Duh, despite being a C rank, Uncle's got some of the goods," Jin-ah smirked with a wink. "C rank isn't even bad, it's above the average curve. Not just that, but Uncle's in one of the top 5 guilds. He's got a good rapport with the guild master, and he's got looks aplenty. That's hard to ignore for a regular woman, and, as it looks like, it works on women even in higher ranks." She snickered as the two considered her words. "Does pose some good facts," he admitted sheepishly as Jin-woo nodded. "Uncle's got a lot going for him. We work out all the time, and he's so powerful, physically, even though he's a mage," he said as the blonde nodded. "He's gone on record to tell a lot of our members that just because you're a certain class, that doesn't mean you should allow your weaknesses to stay. That sounds like him." The two nodded in unison before Jin-woo froze and quickly burned up, Cha-in not noticing at all. Jin-ah balked, just noticing her as well, before she saw her brother and grinned. "All right, these are our fighters," Jong-in showed Obaido as the Uchiha looked at the 4 lined-up individuals. "No, a new person. I guess he got in at the last minute?" Obaido asked as one of the members stood up straight with a salute. "Yes, sir. I'm Sun Kai-hoon. I recently ranked up to a rank from B rank. I'm a tank," he declared. Sun Kai-hoon was a young man of above-average height, a slightly long face, fair skin, short spiky black hair, and black eyes. Wearing a pair of baggy blue and dull yellow striped pants with leather padding on the side, silver greaves, and silver armor over his torso and arms with dull yellow accents, the young man seemed capable with a shield half his size on his back and the longsword at his waist. "Pleasure, Kai-hoon. Have you fought in raids before?" Obaido asked with crossed arms. "And don't make that a him-only question. All of you," he focused on all 4 new members who stood to their full heights. "Have any of you been in any raiding parties?" "I have," Kai-hoon admitted. "Like I said, sir, I was originally a B-rank hunter, and I made a living over the past 2 years going into gates. Mostly C-rank ones, but I've done the occasional B ranks." 2 other members of the lineup looked bashful at the tank's admission of his experience. "There's no point to feeling like that," Jong told the other 3, 2 of whom blushed. "Remember, we all ended up where we are at different times, places, hell, even graduations," he chuckled as one of the lineup, a healer, blushed a brighter red. I'm H. Wogzelhan Galdi-in," she said. Having long, dull purple hair that swept over one shoulder with a scrunchie on the end, she had fair skin and purple eyes. Wearing a simple purple dress and black mantle with thigh-high boots, she nodded with a wooden staff in her hands. "Most of my friends call me D," the healer admitted. "My name's a mouthful," she blushed. "I'm a rank healer. I chose to become a hunter last year." "A powerful healer," Cha-in smiled at that. "We need more of those, trust me," she said encouragingly as the healer smiled happily. "Then, I'm next," the teen next to Kai-hoon began. "Sunjin Han-chung, reporting for duty. I'm a B-rank mage, sir." That had been a young woman who couldn't have been older than 19, maybe even 18. She had white skin, big black eyes behind a pair of circular glasses, and chin-length black hair that wrapped around her head. Wearing a long-sleeved white dress shirt, a strapless black Lolita dress over it, thigh-high black socks, and black dress shoes, she had a lavender metal staff in her hands. "I see. What type of magic are you proficient in?" Obaido asked, and the teen chuckled bashfully. "I can summon spirits using talismans," Chung said, flicking out her hand and revealing 3 such items. "I can only make 3 of them at a time, sadly, and I don't have much experience, more like 0, she declared as Kai-hoon's sweat dropped before chuckling a bit. A mean one," she pouted. "No, wait, that's not what I mean," he said quickly as her pout kept going. Your confidence in your lack of experience was a bit funny." Kai-hoon said nervously as Dee giggled a bit while the last member of this quartet hummed with crossed arms. Hey, let's introduce our last new member of the Hunters. The tank did his best to turn away from her, much to the last newbie's amusement. He chuckled before jabbing a thumb at himself. Husig Cheol, at your service. I'm a B-rank tanker, the now-named Cheol said. Being a man of incredible height, easily 7 feet tall, he was covered head to toe in red armor with golden accents, the armor covered in scratches, with the only bits of it not being armor being around his crotch, elbows, knees, and ankles, which were covered in a thick-looking fabric for ease of movements. He wielded an iron javelin along with an odd medium-sized shield that was red with a thick gold cross on it that even tipped past the edges. You seem like you've got the most experience here, Obaido said as the man tilted his head at him, his odd pointed helmet shifting with the movement. Yes, Obaido smiled in amusement as Jong-in chuckled. I've looked up the directory of A ranks and B ranks before, but I can't place you. I knew about these 3 already, Cheol said as he gestured to his fellow new members. But not you. That's likely because you won't find me among those ranks. I'm a C-rank hunter, no more, no less. Biwa? The other 3 gawked as Cha-in smiled in amusement. Don't let his rank dissuade you from seeking advice, Gina said with a smirk. He's a fellow mage, but he bears far more experience than all of you save for maybe Mr. Husik over there, she added. Obaido's one of our better leaders and has led a B-rank gate mission a few times. Really? Kai-hoon said in shock. This man? And he is a C-rank? Not to disparage him. Kai-hoon had some good friends outside of the Hunters who were that rank and respected the hell out of them. It's just, how? How had this man seemingly gained the entire upper hierarchy's respect? He grew intrigued. Jin-woo observed it all. They really respect Uncle. He didn't tell us about that B-rank gate, he said to his sister who nodded. To be fair, we didn't ask, Jin-ah said, and his face went blank as she snickered once more. Nothing's going on in that head of yours, huh? Shut up. I had a feeling, Cheol said. I don't have a problem with it. It seems like you know how things work around here. Pleased to meet another man who likely fought at the beginning, he added as Obaido wore an impressed expression. So, I was right. I had a feeling, but Cheol is definitely someone who was at the front lines of the beginning of this, he told Cha and Jong. That's good. It'll be nice to have someone else who's knowledgeable about things besides you and Gina, Jong-in said as the A-rank mage nodded. Wait, you as well? Kai-hoon asked as his fellow new members also looked curious sans Cheol. Wait, but she looks so young, Jin-ah exclaimed in disbelief as Gina grinned smugly while Obaido rolled his eyes. Don't let her young looks fool you. Behind that face is the mind of a military woman with 10 years of service, he smirked as she pouted at him, arms crossed beneath her sizable bust. 5 years of service, bucko. I was a military gal as a kid. 2. Ignore him. I'm sure he's 50, Gina smirked as Obaido snorted. No, but seriously, most of you all probably don't know this, but hunters who enter gates often don't exactly age like normal people. Despite his recent verbal bullshit, the man chuckled. Obaido's right, I'm literally 30 already, but I don't look it, huh? You are? Half the guild shouted in disbelief as her brow twitched in annoyance while Jong-in smirked behind his steepled hands at the planning table. Wait, no way, Jin-ah said in shock as Jin-woo nodded. Wait, you knew? I mean, yeah, it's all up on the internet, he admitted as Cha nodded, flustering him. You uncle always spoke of examining every part of the gate to have a better idea of what you're getting into. There are people, even outside of mages, who gain a sixth sense about how strong they're supposed to be, he swallowed nervously. And then there's the stuff about those dangerous ones. He means the red gates, he explained, surprising Jin-woo and some of the guild. I'm sure at least a good amount of our newer members from the past 3 years won't know, but a red gate is an anomaly amongst gates. There's sharp increases in danger level and magical power, Choi Jong-in continued. These gates are also impossible to exit. Red gates happen randomly, Obaido said. It's a special decision to go in and try to clear it because that's the only way to get rid of it. You have to kill the boss or the gate will never go away. Well, unless either the entire party inside dies as well, he added nonchalantly, even if those uninformed paled, his nephew and niece as well. The point is that they are dangerous, and to go into one means you're prepared for either a dungeon break, total victory, or death. How often? Chung asked. I mean, surely people have calculated this kind of risk, right? Sadly, they're impossible to predict, Cha-in admitted as the newbies paled. That said, don't be so worried. Within our guild, we don't leave you without the numbers, forces, or skill to take care of gates typically of B rank. That's the minimum level of a red gate and the most often ones, she smiled disarmingly. I'm sure we should have this kind of talk in the hall later, Zhang said. For now, you all will be facing some of White Tiger's new members along with a single one of their recent additions. Nothing crazy or even life-threatening. These are simple spars to test your experience or mettle. So, on that note, which of you would like to fight? The entire guild murmured, some making bets, others playing rock, paper, scissors, and a few who even joked and pushed another one forward. Looking around, Jin Woo and Jin Ah were a bit surprised by the laid-back atmosphere. A bit surprising, isn't it? Obaido chuckled as he walked up to them with Gina. You probably think we're super serious all the time, don't ya? She asked the two who nodded. Yeah, I did, Jin Woo admitted. I always thought they were composed of nothing but the best, and the best, in my head, are always ready to fight. Gina laughed. Don't worry, there are guys like that, but they're not as serious as you think, she smirked as he nodded. I figured you guys would be worried, Jin Ah said as Obaido cupped his chin. You're taking this more seriously than it really needs to be, Jin Ah. It's just a spar between the newer members, he shrugged as she raised a brow. Sure, there might very well be some impressive ones in the bunch like Chiol or D. There will definitely be some grandstanding, Obaido groaned as Gina shook her head. Some of these guys are real class acts, she said in amusement. But in the end, most of us are professionals who can have some fun with these kinds of things. It's competition, nothing wrong with it, he said even as camera crews slipped in. I've been wondering where they were. It's bound to happen, unfortunately, Zhang said as he got up. All right, of our newest members, 2 are willing to go up, yes? He smiled as he turned to Obaido. In fact, do you mind performing with them? I'm well aware of how some of White Tiger's newbies are, trust me. You'll do fine against most of them. Obaido considered the idea before finding Jin Ah smiling in front of him while Jin Woo looked embarrassed. Come on, you gotta show us what a C rank is made of, his niece said with a teasing grin as Gina smirked. Come on, you might have gotten rusty. Well, I never, Obaido said as half the guild started laughing while the other began placing more bets. HMPH, fine, it'll be nice if 2 of my students ask outright, he added as he walked off to the center of it all, leaving behind a cheering lot and a smiling pair of siblings. Then, Zhang's chuckles silenced them all as he followed after Obaido, leaving them confused. Wait, Jin Woo blinked in confusion. Wait, he said something crazy just now. Is it? Zhang said with one last turn of the head as Cha stumbled. I mean, it's not that surprising. Cha-in herself had a C-rank teacher, he chuckled before continuing on, leaving behind a gawking group. What? Jin Woo was just stunned. They're just like Mr. Song? That made things more exciting than he thought. With Obaido and Zhang, the two moved through the crowd, ignored the paparazzi, and found themselves face to face with a single man with 4 individuals behind him. Yet, it was the man at the front who garnered the many cameras and looks of wonder, him and Zhang in amongst all else. After all, they were fellow guild masters and S-rank hunters. It's been around a couple months, Baek Yun-ho, Zhang smiled cordially for the man across from him, the other S-rank shooting him a nod before finding his eyes landing on Obaido. This guy, his eyes squinted as the Uchiha shot him a look. Baek Yun-ho was a tall man, the same height as himself and Zhang, with a muscular form barely held behind a simple white dress shirt, black slacks, and black dress shoes. Having slightly tanned skin, an orange mane of spiky hair, pronounced canines, and orange eyes. He cupped his chin as Obaido shook his head with a chuckle. Wait, didn't Zhang speak about you? He asked, confusing Obaido for all of 3 seconds before he shook his head. Yeah, he said you made incredible food. A bit weird, but he was probably just being annoying again. Tilda? Zhang's brow twitched as a twitching vein popped onto his cheek. Excuse me, Yunho? The well-muscled rank smirked a bit. "Nothing, you just talk too much sometimes," he said with a sly grin. Sparks flew between them as the others caught up and sweat dropped at the clearly competitive duo. All right, men, please, we're adults here," Obito said from between them with a raised brow as the two leaned back. "Besides, giving the paparazzi less ideas is better for all our sakes." The two flinched before mechanically turning their heads to get flashed by a ton of cameras. "Instant regret," the two said in unison as Obito wore an amused smile. "Now, who am I fighting?" he asked Jong-in, who blinked before perking up with a smile as Yun-ho shot him a weird look. "Wait, I thought he said he was a cook," he said. "I said he's an amazing cook, not that he was a cook," the bespectacled man said as he adjusted the seeing eye lenses in question. "No, I just have members who have an array of impressive skills compared to most guilds," Jong-in smiled ignorantly. Yun-ho's indignation reared its head. "Stupid frickin'," he grumbled something as Jin-ah and Jin-woo peeked around their uncle's sides. "Tesk, what's your rank?" "C rank," Obito answered easily, surprising him. "Wait, what? You're joking, right? I know for a fact the only C ranks on this bastard's team," he pointed at the grinning Jong, "are not on either strike force." "Well, I was, for a good 3 years, before I switched over a year back to clean up crew." Now, Yun-ho was just confused. What the hell is he planning? He thought as he shot Jong a flat look. "Look, no offense to you, but all of my newbies this month are B, or E, ranked. I don't think that'd end well for you." "I'm not worried about their ranks in the least. This fight won't last long enough for any one of them I face." Obito smiled intently as Yun-ho's eyes narrowed in annoyance but interest. "That's so. So, you'd be up for fighting one of our ranks who's got a year under his belt?" "I'm up for anything. I'm not worried." "Well, they'd see, wouldn't they?" "All right, since you clearly got more crazies in that club of yours, I'm picking a saner ring," Yun-ho said as Obito sweat dropped before turning to his nephew and niece. "Hey, uncle, I know you're possibly super smart and stuff, but will that work here?" Jin-ah asked, worried, before finding a hand ruffling her hair. "I believe you're misunderstanding just how far enough smarts will take you, but you're also missing another key piece of concept about fighting. Smarts, strength, cunning, creativity, and skill are the basics. I'll show you them here and now," Obito smiled calmly as Jin-woo considered his words. "I want to see it," he said to his uncle. "I want to see just how far you can push a C-rank power," he specified as Obito smirked. "Your brother's understanding of what I mean is showing," he chuckled as the young man blushed but nodded all the same. "But he's right, how far you push a power, no matter how weak-looking it might seem, is a big part of why this fight won't last long." Yun-ho's ears twitched at that. Creativity, huh? Well, now he just had to see it. "Yo, Gideon, you're up." "On it." The man who'd answered was a thin one of Chiol's height. Having long, shaggy platinum blonde hair that hid his eyes, fair skin, and an impeccable grin, the man before him wore a sleeveless white top, black track pants, a pair of black boots, and a tan-colored scarf that wrapped up his right bicep. On his hips, Obito noted the pair of hatchets. No, his body type. His eyes narrowed imperceptibly before he crossed his arms and closed his eyes. "You're an assassin class, aren't you?" Gideon flinched for a moment, even as Jin-woo blinked before nodding. "He walks like one," he muttered as Cha raised a brow at that. "Wait, can he tell? Curious? Could this E-rank hunter differentiate between hunter ranks on sight?" "Why do you say so, Mr. Uchiha?" She was intrigued. What part of this man's body made him think so? "Well, for one, he's a dual-wielding fighter," Obito twitched his fingers as Gina rubbed her chin with a nod. "But his chest isn't wide enough. Anyone who'd swing around those axes would likely be more built than he is, but, for the sake of argument, let's say he can. It doesn't complement attire. Literally look at every hunter here who's a fighter and tell me what's the same about them." Yun-ho's eyes widened at that. All right, I didn't expect that. It was an obvious thing most wouldn't recognize without high spatial awareness. "And, of course, the biggest thing was the weapons in question," Obito smirked as the fighter snickered a bit. "Those are either fake handles or they have a special property to them. They're not in special holsters to secure them to your pants. Obviously, it'd fool someone who wasn't thinking about it, but there's no way an axe, even a small one, wouldn't weight down your pants at all. Well, damn. Gideon blinked thrice, though it was hidden behind his hair. Geez, dude, what? Did you take a class on checking people out? I'm aware of what many different types of hunters are like. A guild is full of all kinds, after all. Excellent, Jong-in grinned as Yun-ho huffed. You're still fighting him, he said to the picked-apart assassin. His observation's pretty high, but that doesn't mean he has the physical ability to keep up with you. Yun-ho had been fine saying that out loud, sure of it. But he'd made sure to look at Obaido to see his expression, and when he saw it, he knew something off would happen in this fight. For Obaido's smirk spoke of a confidence to face against an A-rank assassin. That left Yun-ho completely caught off guard. Let's start the spars with a pair of experienced hands, Jong-in said as the group walked to a circle on the White Tiger's side. Ah, yes, hying, he spoke casually to Obaido, who nodded even as the entire damn group gawked at them. I have a feeling I'll know how this will go, but for the sake of truly showing experience over pure skill, just movement should be good enough. No attachments. Obaido hummed at that. All right, there shouldn't be a shortage in my arsenal on that level, he nodded as Cha-in finally spoke up. Jong-in, how long have you really known Mr. Uchiha? She asked straightforwardly. You hold a great amount of respect for him, we all do, but you seem to know more than even before the guild. The S-rank and C-rank locked eyes before Obaido shrugged. That's because I and he met before the gates were a thing, he admitted, surprising a good amount of people. To be fair, is it that odd? Gina offered the group. It's not like life started once the gates and monsters became a threat. People lived lives before all of this madness. Jin-woo considered her words before nodding. She does have a point, he said to his sister, who rubbed the back of her head. I mean, when you think about it, S-ranks back then were mostly normal people. There's probably a ton of people from Choi Jong-in's neighborhood who knew him before all of this, she admitted as the other hunters considered it before nodding. Hunters just became so big compared to everything else. HMPH, Yun-ho did agree with her assessment, but there was something else. That'd be different. To believe in his abilities and having a great amount of respect for someone is not always mutual. Jong probably knew more about this C-rank's powers than he'd let on. They'd see, though, seeing as they reached the ring of his side's creation and the two combatants went inside. With the ring being a 50-meter circle with metal rails to fence it off, they had enough space for some simple combat. The rules of the spars from here on out are as such, Yun-ho began as the two in the circle turned to him. The first to be unable to fight back loses. If you're thrown out of bounds, you lose. If your opponent could have made a killing shot, you lose. We're hunters, we've got good healers on standby. No killing, but you've got free reign. The air grew thick with excitement and anticipation, Jin-woo and Jin-ah in the latter category. I hope Uncle's as good as he makes himself out to be, the girl said as Jin-wood nodded, but he felt an odd amount of calm. Something within him believed in his uncle beyond a doubt, and so he took a deep breath and watched it all with every bit of his attention. The fight can commence at any moment, Jong-in smiled as Yun-ho waited for them to begin. And they did, both combatants vanishing in intense swirls of wind that didn't make sense. The White Tiger's guild master's eyes snapped up and around, disbelief filling his gaze as the sound of rapid impacts reached the crowd's ears. Jong-in. Yes, all that's been said, every letter, has been nothing but the truth, the bespectacled rank said even as Cha-in's eyes moved around with curiosity. He's almost half as fast as I am, how though? That's the part that didn't make sense. Actually, Choi Jong-in, I never figured it out, but what exactly is his magical power? Jong-in smiled as Gina nodded. I don't wish to reveal the truth of his skills, not in full, but spatial magic isn't the worst way to explain its main functions. He cupped his chin with a nod, even as the others blinked. Half the group did, at least. The other half of the hunters nodded. That's the best way to put it, a random fighter said. Wait, I don't, right, he's on strike team B, Cha-in realized as those members grinned or smiled knowingly. HMPH, she pouted a bit, and a good amount of them chuckled. Gina grinned knowingly as two figures skidded back from one loud collision in the center of the arena, allowing the group to see the state of them. And, let's just say, the White Tigers weren't looking too hot. What? Yunho balked at the tattered state of Gideon's clothing and some of the bruises revealed from those openings, the man's axes in his hands. What the hell happened? His eyes narrowed on Obito. Outside of a few cuts in his top, only a single cut on his shoulder was all he got in exchange. What's he hitting that guy with? Jin-Ah asked in disbelief even as relief filled her entire being. I don't get it. What is Uncle's magic? I don't think spatial magic does that. Not if it's obeying the rules of normal spatial magic, Gina explained to the younger female, confusing her. There aren't really a lot of people who can say they can use spatial magic as an attack. It doesn't add up from most mages' repertoire. Well, those that can use spatial magic. It's mostly for putting items away or traveling long distances, Cha-in said. But that doesn't explain what's happening. He's not teleporting, he's keeping up with Gideon's speed. I can watch them the entire way. He's overtaking him in that category as a mage. That seems, and is, physically impossible as a fighter. She'd been blessed with speed that ascended her beyond many of her peers. Being S rank meant a lot compared to even a rank. It was such an exponential jump that one couldn't even consider them in the same ranking system sometimes. So, how was a mage with a supposed C rank power, as the man, Jin Woo, said, able to enhance him this much? Hadn't Zhang basically said for him to hold back? What exactly was his full power if he was such a threat already? Spatial magic? Can he control the flow of spatial magic? Yunho's eyes narrowed. No, that's simply not possible, he frowned as Jin Woo considered it. It'd have been all over the world by now if he could, he said, and the S rank nodded. It's as Cha-in said, he continued as the two combatants met in the middle of the ring. Obito's forearms slammed into Gideon's, locking them there. The Carrot Top's eyes glowed as they separated, something there that he couldn't truly make out until the next exchange supposedly. No wonder he said what he did, he scoffed as Zhang chuckled. He's using this odd spatial power to enhance his blows and body, Yunho said, surprising but ever more confusing the others. There's a mechanic here we're missing that some of you know already. Gina chuckled. Trust me, if you actually knew what was going on, you'd be so confused, she shrugged at his look of confusion. The point is, spatial magic, abnormal rules, and the method of using his magic are the big facts. The moment you see the truth of what he's manipulating, it'll make more and less sense at the same time unless he explains it. There were 5 more clashes that ran down the length of the ring before it ended with Obito's leg locking around Gideon's neck. There was a large rumble and dust cloud that ended with a body bouncing against the ground before it flopped onto the dirt after its last tumble, an assassin groaning against the firm but malleable earth. Obito stood up in the original dust cloud, dusting off his clothes and rolling his shoulders. It's been a while since I've used it like that, he said, nodding to Zhang-in's claps. You were right, Zhang-in. I might have gotten a bit rusty, but I'm back to a good level. I'll need to make sure to not let that happen again. It's of little matter, you've handled it well, the mage said with a nod before turning to their gawking new members. Do you understand the difference between a man with a fully exploited average power and a hunter with all the power in the world from the offset? People assume a lot of us S-rank, but you all need to remember that an amazing power in the hands of a fool is just a fool's power. We train just as much as you do, some of us more oddly and others just more rigorously. We're not unused to hard work. That's the difference between many S-rank levels, and the same holds true for you all. Obito nodded as he folded his arms into his completely untouched yukata. What? Yunho's eyes widened as the Uchiha smiled a bit before holding up a hand and allowing it to glow blue before it released. Is that string? Thread, Gina clarified at the thin black length that curled out from around Obito's wrist. Spatial thread, she said more specifically. She'd been correct earlier. Yunho had no effing idea how this worked. I can't. The man's brain fizzled out for a bit. I'm done. My head hurts, he grumbled as he walked over, picked up his downed comrade, and ran back to his side. Planning time, he shouted at his guild, the group shooting Obito nervous smiles before they followed their guild master. Cha-in cupped her chin as Obito smiled in amusement. I don't, and you can use something greater than what you just did. Yes, quite a few applications of both spatial power and thread, he told her, and her eyes narrowed in thought as Jin Woo smiled but looked confused. I was right to not worry, but like everyone else, this doesn't make sense, he chuckled. Yep, it's just thread. Well, spatial thread, whatever that means, Jin-ah said while pushing on it, huh? The youngest Sung blinked as she tried to push on the thread, and couldn't reach it. Cha-in's eyes widened at that. You can make that into clothing, can't you? She realized almost instantly as Jong nodded. Though, don't be fooled, my thread allows a lot of force via command. It's a power that's meant to be brittle, Obaido said as he gripped the middle of the line. Like so. He snapped it. And an explosive force, not a great one but a decent one, threw her hair back. But her brows shot up to meet her hairline as it all clicked. This is a C-rank power, Obaido smiled. With an unknowable rank of possibilities, he chuckled as she tilted her head to the side. I see, she said with narrowed eyes of interest as Kai-hun blinked. I don't. Why does it do that? He asked as his fellow newbies nodded save for Chia. It's the force around it, he elaborated after a moment of thought. That girl couldn't touch it. There's a spatial energy barrier around it, likely from compressed spatial magic. So, imagine what happens when you break the shape. All confused eyes understood immediately. So, by using that on your feet, you can gain that kind of speed, Cha-in smiled at the very precise power. Am I right in assuming you can break the thread on command? You'd be right, Obaido chuckled as he folded his arms together. Spatial thread has all the tensile thread of normal thread, but I can make it as strong as a steel cable if I need to. And you can imagine several different ways you can apply thread. Yes, he said, and she nodded. So, my thread can follow those same rules. By spinning together, crossing, or applying a different pattern, I can enhance the way the spatial nature of it works. Oh, and I still have normal spatial power. I just need to wrap it in my thread first or be willing to be without an eye for a bit. Wait, that last one doesn't work, Jin-ah pouted as he chuckled. Oh, it does, Obaido said, confusing even Gina. It's one of the ways of using it that really pushes the envelope, he smirked as her face went blank. Hold on there, buddy, buckaroo, she sidled up to him and flicked his nose. No, you do not break the laws of our lovely simple system with your bullshit. Oi. Right, guys? Yeah. Obaido facepalmed as Gina cackled while Cha-in barely restrained herself and Jong-in didn't. Jin-ah was laughing along with the blonde mage while Jin-woo chuckled behind a fist. Yes, it seemed his uncle was quite odd. Maybe that's why he was able to bridge the gap, so to speak. Dive into the world. He smiled nervously as Gina nodded sagely at the rapid number of cameras flashing in his and Jong-in's faces. Oh, I'd forgotten they were there, the C-rank said nervously as half the guild started snickering while others wailed as they lost their bets. Remind me, Jong-in, how long does it take the press to print anything? A matter of hours, the S-rank mage said with a weak smile at one final flash. Oh, thank God. Quick, we need to leave. Easy there, you too, He-in said with a smile and giggle. We are in the middle of something. You wouldn't want to disrespect Yun-ho, would you? Yes, Jong-in said instantly as the man in question squawked from across the way. You bastard? The White Tiger's guild master gawked. I mean to say, he began to backtrack. Of course not. Do you think he believed that? Jong-in whispered to Obaido. Not in the slightest, the lower-ranked mage chuckled. Now, on to the next big trial, the press. As the three navigated through the social minefield of the human majority, people watching the live stream were surprised. He blinked from within his office, surprised. Wait, he's supposed to be a C-rank? The man said in surprise. Hyung-nim, have you seen this? Another, younger, man said as he popped into his office before coming over. Apparently, that man's been working with the hunters for over 4 years. And what of his occupation? It says he's their miner. What? Have you seen this, Ryuji? A woman said as she leaned around a man's large office chair. This guy, he's supposed to be a C-rank mage, but he beat that A-rank assassin not only in speed but in physical power as well, she added with a look of interest. And the live stream showed his name and she balked. He's Japanese? The man in the seat, Ryuji, blinked as they showed the man's actual profile on the screen. No, he's a Korean-Chinese mix. That was beyond surprising. What would make a man change his name, assumably, twice over? He shook his head, the bullshit on the screen not concerning him in the least. Just another weakling conquering weaklings, he'd never get how this was big. Still, he read up on the man's on-screen information and raised a brow at both the number of raids he'd been in, but also his previous status. One of their former leaders, this C rank? He knew how the hunters worked. They didn't have teams composed of a single C rank, much less their leader of the B team being allowed to be one. Tisk, God, do I need to care about this trash? Probably not, but he did have a guild. Maybe they'd want him. Thomas might not even care. Still, it'd be better to call the man and let him know. Obito sighed in relief, even as he ignored his phone currently ringing like it had lost its mind. I'm not answering that, he said, quickly putting it on silent before focusing back on their upcoming fighters. Chiol, Kai-Hun, and Kai, Obito considered as the chosen ones nodded. Kai-Hun looked downright inspired, while Chiol chuckled next to the short woman who joined them. Yes, sir, he said with vigor that Jin-Woo smiled at. Jin-Ah, meanwhile, quickly typed on her phone, fingers going a mile a second. Geez, all my school is freaking out about you, she pouted as he sweat dropped. That's not my fault, he said. Besides, it'll hopefully die down, he said unsurely, Obito added before narrating for himself a bit. I don't even like using the internet, and I can already tell this is gonna be a pain in the ass. Wait, seriously? Gina snickered. Obito, come on, it's the internet. It's one of the most useful things in the world. And I hate using it. I'd sooner go to a library if I can. Half the crowd shivered at the thought as Jin-Woo snorted at that. Following that, they watched the matches of the other new members. Combat between B and A ranks that seemed emboldened by their first match. As they did, Jin-Woo watched the fighters. Not to say he thought Kai-Hun and Chiol were weak or unimpressive, they weren't. Especially the older man who showed a sort of dexterity with his javelin the E rank didn't expect. But he also needed to see how other fighters fought. And after watching that short woman who joined their lineup, he was left impressed but feeling a bit insecure. I don't have any skills, it was something that classes got after some point. Mages got their spell abilities from the offset, it was in their name after all. Jin-Woo knew that all tanks got taunt as an ability somewhere down the line and knew it was the same for fighters with fighting skills. Looking down at his hands, he looked at his calloused palms before finding a hand on his shoulder. He blinked and looked to the side to lock eyes with a smiling Hien. You're overthinking things, she said as he flinched before looking away from her. I'm sure your uncle showed you many times, being the best of your rank can open many other doors, Cha explained. I get that, I really do. Uncle's amazing in so many ways I feel like I'm just learning about, he said as they turned their heads to watch Obito giving tips to Kai-Hun and Kai. But I'm literally called the weakest amongst even E ranks. You are? Yeah, he admitted, utterly embarrassed. I'm supposed to be a fighter A and I do pull my weight in D rank gates, she looked a bit impressed, and he burned more. But that's not enough. I have to lift any burden on my uncle's shoulders. Cha-Hee-in's eyes widened as she remembered Obito's words from a year back before her eyes softened. I don't need to guess how much he matters to you. Uncle's done everything for us, Jin-Ah added from ahead of them, back to the oldest fighters. He likely could have been a rank if he's really out here fending off those kinds of fighters, but he gave it up to make sure we didn't. So we wouldn't be alone, she scuffed her heel as Jin-Woo rested a hand on her shoulder. I want to go into medical school. He looked surprised while Hien smiled. Jin-Ah, Nope, just because you're a hunter doesn't mean you're gonna take all of that on your own, she turned to him and grinned. I want to solve the eternal slumber, his head dropped. It's not just people like us who have asleep parents like Mom. I just want to do something. You're mature for your age, Hien smiled. Though, I'm curious, are you not a class, Jin-Ah? Nope, I'm just a normal person. Though our uncle says I've got a lot of good reflexes and pretty decent flexibility. I wondered if I'd have been able to get a healing skill, Jin-Ah said with an embarrassed laugh as Jin-Woo blinked at her. But I never got chosen, you know? That's not necessarily a sure thing, Hien said. Remember, Ching said she only awakened recently, 2 years older than you to be exact. It can still happen. Jin-Ah considered that. If I could, you know, I'd like to just raid with my family, mostly, she blushed. And then we have to find Dad. Huh? Explaining that their father went missing in a gate startled her, but not more than when they told her how they knew he was alive. Obaido has such a skill? She asked. Yeah, Gina said as she came over. Obaido's thread can give him the exact coordinates of someone who willingly accepts its existence. It's like it vanishes from this dimension and sticks around like a shadow. It's another one of his power's rules, but not more than attaching. From there, he can tell you where they are by following it, but even into a closed gate. I mean, is it that weird? Jin-Ah asked. It's more esoteric than most could attempt, he said. It's true that Obaido wields spatial magic, but is it so powerful? We don't know. He just knows that a person who's died with it attached would leave it broken, Jin-Woo said with narrowed eyes. He was also originally looking for him before he had to take care of us. That's another reason we need to be able to look after ourselves. At least for a bit. Did he have any whereabouts? That's the thing. He said Dad's been moving. Jin-Woo rubbed the back of his head, confused. He puts it like this. Dad's signature isn't in South Korea anymore. Uncle's got a good grasp on his power's locating ability, and we've looked at the maps to guess where it is. He's currently in the middle of the ocean. The two women looked startled as Jin-Ah nodded. Last we asked him, it was heading towards America, Jin-Ah explained. It reaches that far? It was almost insane that Obaido hadn't been picked up by the monitoring division if she didn't already know he kept things under wraps. That's incredible. Yep, Gina smiled as she showed her bicep. There, they could see an invisible band of some sort. It was almost impossible to notice, but there was something there. I know he's done it for all of us. The other guys probably don't know why he did it, but just accepted it and moved on. Wow, Uncle gets way more respect around here than I can imagine, the youngest son said in disbelief as Gina smirked. You'd never believe, but he's gotten asked out a couple times. He-in's head snapped to her with intense interest. Really? When? I'm sure I would have heard, she leaned in with the other two as Gina grinned slyly. Damn it, we lost, Yoon-ho said an hour later as Jong-in chuckled. It's all good to know where these hunters of ours stand, he said even as his fellow S-rank crossed his arms with a look. You know there's no way he isn't stronger, of course you do. He handled Gideon so easily despite getting a few cuts and you held him back. The S-rank mage smiled knowingly. So, really, how strong is he? The air between them was silent before Choi Jong-in ran a hand through his hair. He's close, he said vaguely even as Yoon-ho's eyes widened. Very close, what he lacks is equipment. It's something I never realized, but Hyung-nim doesn't have any. Not even an iron scythe or chain, Jong-in said. I want to get him those things, but I know he won't accept something so easily. He's a headstrong man on the oddest of topics, but I understand his pride. If the public knew, that'd be good news, wouldn't it? Another possible's rank would be amazing to them. Why? Because he desires to not out himself. Well, I guess that's all I should really accept, the well-built man said with a sigh. What I wouldn't give to be able to be a S-rank and not be bothered by reporters. Preaching to the choir on that one. The days following that event had been a bit more exciting depending on who you asked. An entire month of people wanting to know him, to get close, to butter him up, or even people who wanted to date him. Oh, yeah, that had been fun. Obaido smiled nervously as he did his best to dissuade the 10th woman who'd come to his nephew and niece's home asking him for a date by month's end. As he closed the door at the wobbly-eyed woman, he sighed in relief as Jin-Ah grinned. Uncle, you've got to get out of the house and enjoy your slow youth, she admonished him with a faux pout he ignored with a simple head pat. I'm not going to just date some woman who comes up to me because they think I'm famous or something. Those women are not trying to date me for me, Obaido admitted as Jin-Ah blinked at his thoughtful response. Besides, I need a woman who can exercise alongside me if I was to be fair, and most of those women were more housewives than anything else. She gawked. Wait, you have an actual preference? She asked in disbelief. What? Uncle, I thought you just didn't understand women. Obaido's face contorted into confusion before he shook his head. Nope, I'm making dinner and not dealing with your brand of insanity today. You definitely got that part from Kyung-hai. he muttered as he moved into the kitchen only to find her coming in with another grin. No more trying to get me to date, I'll handle it. Hee tilde nope, I'm here to help cook, Jin-ah said with a scout's salute and a gleam in her eye. I don't trust you but very well. As the two of them went to work in the kitchen area, she did have a few other questions. Wait, did bro go on a raid today? She asked. Yes, it's another rare D rank gate for him. I hope he's doing well with his new daggers. Yes, Obaido had finally gotten around to that part of his deal with his nephew. Giving the boy some of his old throwing knives had been something he'd been meaning to do. He's getting good at using them, she said as she washed the rice. But he is a fighter, isn't he? Knives? That's more assassin-like than fighter-like, Jin-ah said as Obaido considered her words. Well, you're right on that front, but I think it's because Jin-woo understands his strengths and weaknesses more as he raids. Remember, originally, he had a sword and that changed. He's becoming a better warrior by understanding battle in his own way. The girl nodded before they continued on. As the risotto began to simmer, she hopped onto the counter as Obaido leaned back against it. Actually, me and bro were wondering, Uncle, she began as he raised a brow. Yes? Obaido asked. Don't you have equipment? Jin-ah asked. You say those old daggers were from the beginning, but every other time you talk about equipment, you're talking about making it, which is a whole other thing, she blinked before shrugging. But my first question, please, don't you have your own personal equipment like your fellow guild members or even Gina Unnai? Obaido considered her words. The thing is, I've always focused on making my own, he began as she nodded. But working with monster parts isn't easy, and I wasn't experienced enough to do it in the beginning, so I stopped and focused on mastering my magic and body. I guess, following that, I just made basic battle attire and fought like that until I could reach a good level of smithmanship. It's crazy that you can say that. Shushu, you beat in a rank hunter, aren't you? I don't know. Interested in that? On some level, I do like a good fight, so don't make that mistake. I've got my own want to fight and do battle with others. That said, I don't want that kind of attention. Just from that one fight alone, Jin-ah, I've gotten hounded by women, reporters, and other guilds. Yeah, I remember that, she hummed. I mean, it's obvious you won't go to them, so I don't know why they're so adamant. You've got a good relationship with a lot of the people in the hunters, you've got respect, recognition, pull, and even taught one of the S rank. What do other guilds think they can offer you? Jin-ah considered it a lot of the time. With her initial shock wearing off, she'd come to realize how good her uncle's life was as a C rank with power and experience that could best in a rank. Not many could boast the things he'd done or could do. It was a big topic on forums she'd snuck into to gauge the public's opinion, and most people were saying that he was some kind of hidden agent or an association member playing between guilds to monitor them. It's just business. They want people in their guilds who can fight tougher gates. With tougher gates handled, you get better equipment, materials, things to sell or eat. Is it that surprising? When you put it like that, I guess not. As soon as she said that, there was a knock on the door that surprised the two of them before Obaido blinked. Gina, Obaido said in surprise as Jin-ah hopped off the counter and hurried to the door. She didn't tell me she was coming today, he added, eyebrows raised even as Jin-ah grinned. Maybe it's not about business, Shushu, she thought with a good hunch. It's likely about your dating preferences. She answered the door and found a familiar rank mage there holding onto a large shopping bag. Wearing a white V-neck crop top, a pair of black tights with pockets that fit well against her legs, and some red running shoes, Gina Acolyte smiled at Jin-ah. Afternoon, how's it going? She asked the younger female who gestured into the home with a nod and smile. Life's moving and Uncle's love life is annoying him, Jin-ah said cheekily as Gina smirked. You should see the forums with some of the women hunters. I swear to God, Jin-ah, some of those ladies are not child-friendly. I can imagine, Unnai. Taking off her shoes at the front and coming in, Gina's stomach growled as she grinned hungrily at the smell of risotto. Oh man, he's making that good stuff again, she said, surprising Jin-ah. Wait, opportunity, she realized quickly. You've eaten his cooking before? Jin-ah asked nonchalantly as they walked down the hall towards the kitchen. Gina laughed embarrassedly at that, rubbing the back of her neck with a bashful grin that got all of Jin-ah's attention. Well, okay, so Obito did say he could hold stuff like normal spatial magic, right? So, one time, during a mission into a C-rank gate, we got separated from the others. It was a tall gate that had like 7 floors, and this was back when I was still new to raiding. She smiled some more. So, while we were working on how to survive, he surprised me by showing me his spatial skill, but I didn't expect much. Regular spatial magic typically can't hold a lot, and then he brought out the portable stove. Jin-Ah covered her mouth as her bark of laughter was barely restrained, Gina smirking at her. Yep, rice, water, chicken stock, and apples. I swear that man walks with his kitchen, she chuckled. I was utterly baffled by that, but then I ate food I couldn't imagine in a dungeon, lost but not starving. I knew how to look at the good of a situation, and that's also when Obito showed me his locating ability. We got back to the group in under 3 hours completely unharmed. Noting the woman's look of admiration as they looked around the corner, Jin-Ah nodded to this. Gina did like Obito, that much had been confirmed. Now, how to get the man to reciprocate, that would take much planning. Good afternoon, Gina, Obito said as he turned to face them, the woman's grin wobbling as she blushed before quickly showing her bought goods. I bought us some beer. You know, the kind we drink on occasion after a raid? She stuttered somewhat as Obito hummed but nodded with a smile. Oh God, kill me now, Gina's cheeks burned as he chuckled a bit. Sure, I don't mind drinking with you. Though, would you be up for dinner? Obito asked without tact as the woman's heart beat rapidly before she shook her head, hiding her embarrassment by shifting a bang. Yeah, sure you can take me. Oh, let me eat here, she corrected horribly as he raised a brow. Well, glad to have you, he smiled, and the woman's heart barely settled. Did you have a raid today? Huh? Oh, I went to one of the lower gate raids as a sort of guard, the rank mage admitted as she came into the kitchen, put the beer down on the table, and moved to his side to look at his cooking. I figured I might as well and just give some people more chances to experience C-rank gates. Those aren't easy to come by. Usually they're mostly bought up by other guilds. Obito's head turned to observe her for a moment before his slowly falling eyes snapped back to the food, the man running a hand through his hair with some red on his own cheeks. Tilda, Jin-Ah observed the 2 adults from the dining table with a sly look. Uncle's barely noticing, but we can work on that, she concocted her plan as the front door opened. Hen? A familiar young man's voice made a curious sound before he chuckled. Oh, Uncle's cooking. Your uncle's been all over the news, came a female voice that had Jin-Ah's head snapping to the hallway towards the kitchen. Ah, excuse me, the sound of someone dropping their shoes reached her. Did my brother bring home a girl? Impossible. These chances were too slim, and yet, here she was, getting 2 shows for the price of one. When her brother came around the corner, he blinked at the situation in the kitchen in surprise. Ah, Miss Gina came over, Jinwoo smiled before gesturing to the new female who'd entered their home as the older hunters turned their heads. This is one of my formal raiding partners, Lee Ju-hee, he said with a bit of a blush, but a grin that was hard to miss. The hunter around Jinwoo's age bowed to the group despite her awe at the 2 adults in the kitchen. Ju-hee was a young woman who stood at Jinwoo's height with long bright orange hair, pale skin, and blue eyes, wearing a knee-length maroon coat, a plaid black and white dress beneath it, and some socks. She looked at Obito and Gina with some awe. I thought you said it'd only be your uncle here, she asked Jinwoo, who chuckled. Him and Miss Gina are close comrades from the Hunters Guild, he told her succinctly and without issue. Gina shifted a bang out of her face as Obito raised a brow at her pink cheeks, leaning forward a bit in an act that sent the woman's face into the red gutter. Jin-Ah's eyes squinted at that and realized she might be able to kill 3 birds with one Jinwoo. Pleased to meet you, Obito greeted the young woman with a smile, relieving Gina of her heart-melting burden. Why, yeah, nice to meet ya, she said with a shaky grin. Can he just not be hot right now? Please? Even in the man's tight black top and gray sweatpants, he looked good to her. Like, did she have it that bad, or was he just hot? Gina wasn't sure if she wanted to know. The feeling in her chest very much welcomed the confusion despite her embarrassment. Ju-hee took one look at the situation and squinted as Jinwoo blinked at it all. What's going on? He wondered as he gestured to the table in the kitchen. You can sit here. This is my sister, Jin Ah, Jinwoo explained as he put his bag down just outside of the kitchen area, the pair of long kunai crossing on its side noted by Obito along with a bandage on the young man's cheek. How was today's gate? The man asked the two. Did your knives work well for you? Obito said with a chuckle as he turned and handled the stove, turning off the fire as Gina nodded. You've been taking the occasional D rank from what Obito tells me, she said, regaining her composure. How are those? From E to D rank is at least a 5 times jump in difficulty. Are really? Juhi asked, surprised by being given numbers on the difference. I don't think anyone's ever said it like that. Well, it's not something people really put down into numbers. That said, E ranks are basically nothing but bigger animals, whereas D rank is where you'll likely meet some animals with special traits, or even the boss will be a larger animal than average who has special abilities. The A ranker explained, surprising the younger trio in the home. Make no mistake, they're still strong compared to a normal person. They are, but, thanks to Uncle's training, it's not as bad as it could be. Jinwoo nodded as Gina raised a brow. E-rank gates are actually pretty easy, all things considered. They're mostly just a numbers game, right? Oh, someone might have a little fire in him like Obito. Well, she was happy for him getting to hit his stride. You're right, bosses in E-rank gates, or dungeons, aren't really bosses so much as a lot of opponents 90% of the time. The D ranks we've been doing have only half that type, Juhi said, getting a nod out of Obito as he pulled out several plates. The other half are usually what you said, large animal monsters. We faced a giant wolf with water blades over its paws. It wasn't easy. Thankfully, Mr. Kai Yul was there, but it had a strong nature compared to his. He's a fire-using mage, Jinwoo explained as Obito and Gina considered that. He's a C-rank like Uncle, and is the teacher of Miss Hien. Oh, right, Jong-in did say something like that. Gina really wondered where these never-ending weird ones were coming from. 2 C-rank hunters who trained as rank hunters in the same time frame. That sounded crazy. He sounds like he's well-rounded, Obito said as Juhi nodded before being served some risotto. Thank you. She thanked him a moment later as Obito set everyone their own food. And left a blushing Gina with a large plate of food, something that stacked almost a foot high, which Jin Ah didn't hesitate to comment on. No offense, ma'am, but isn't that too much? The youngest there asked as the mage woman cleared her throat while Obito sat opposite her. No, I'm just a big eater, she admitted bashfully as the other mage in the room chuckled knowingly. Quiet you, Gina pouted and Obito smiled good-naturedly. Not a word, he told her, and she blushed again, crossing her arms under her chest. The bounce that followed wasn't lost on the younger ones seated at the table. Juhi's hair stood up on end before her head, mechanically turned to the looking away Jinwoo. They're huge, he thought in disbelief and embarrassment. Jin Ah wasn't much better, her eyebrow twitching painfully. Is that where all that food goes? She thought with indignation. That's not fair. Gina's pout barely lasted until her second bite, wherein she just blushed and looked away from the smirking Obito, whose mind was still boggled. Did she? I don't remember them being so big, he thought with a look away from Gina. Stupid hot smirking men, she muttered in her mind as she kept on eating. She'd eaten 2 servings of that amount before the others could finish their first, something that didn't get ignored. Where did it go? The younger group balked. Are you a black hole? Gina rolled her shoulders before patting her stomach. I'm gonna need to do some exercise after this, she whined softly as Obito chuckled. His own food done already. Well, how about we exercise together and then drink those beers, he offered her, and the woman perked up, definitely attracted to the idea. I didn't know you did physical conditioning, Obito said with some surprise and respect. Gina huffed but smirked all the same. Of course I do, mage. You never shut up about your own training sessions despite being our class. I couldn't just lag behind, and, besides, it did help me keep my figure. I might have been 10 pounds heavier before we met, she muttered with a red face. I'm glad to be such an influence. Now, are you kids up for some training? Juhi gasped as she barely kept up with Jinwoo and Jin Ah. Why? Is this what you've been doing? She gasped for each breath on their 10th lap around the park. My lungs are killing me. Well, yeah, Jinwoo explained. looking only slightly bothered with his sister a step below that. HMPH, I train with my uncle every other day, he said with determined eyes, the three of them turning their gazes to the running ahead duo of Obaido and Gina. The woman didn't seem as fit as the man was, but she was easily a sight better than them. Her pace and Obaido's kept in sync as they shot ahead. You're good, the man said with a smirk as Gina controlled her breathing before grinning as she began to pull ahead. Oh, Obaido uttered as he pushed his body once more. As they began to even out, Gina smirked at him and shot ahead with speed he didn't understand for all of 3 seconds. You clever woman, he praised before he intensified his next step. The man shot off after Gina, the two somehow quickly rounding the bend behind the shocked teens. Wasn't there half a mile of park behind them? Wait, what? Jinwoo balked in confusion as the adults passed them, but not before revealing what was up. Your telekinesis. Learned from the best. They ran ahead once more, leaving the three to consider their words. Mages are so versatile, Jinwoo considered in surprise. I didn't realize that Gina Nuna could do something like this as well, but her powers would be perfect, wouldn't they? He said to the other two with a look of wonder. Finding different ways to apply the power they've been given is how they become a ranks, he nodded as Ju-hee balked at it all before tripping. Are you all right? He asked quickly as he and Jin-ah came to a stop, going back to kneel by the healer's flat against the ground form. The young woman shot him the biggest set of wobbly eyes possible, getting an off-to-the-side cough from Jinwoo, lest he be beaten by her look of pain and anguish. Jin-ah sweat dropped at it all. Obaido rubbed the back of his head as he looked away from his fellow mage's moist form next to him. Phew, Gina tugged at her top a bit, cheeks flushed, body full of sweat, but stomach less bulky. Why you don't play around, she said as she turned to the facing away Obaido, and froze as the man pulled at the bottom of his top, peeling off each inch of cloth like some kind of tease. She burned up as his top came off with a pop, his hair mussed up as he flapped his clothing off to the side. And Gina got a good view of the man's back. What are you doing to me? The woman whispered with a look of fear that was only drowned out by the fact she was basically ogling what had to be the perfect back. Muscle, low fat, and definition that couldn't be beat sat before her and turned the Arank's mind to mush. The others either blushed or looked sheepish. Jinwoo was in the latter category, observing his uncle's result of his never-ending training. He's bigger when he doesn't have clothes on for some reason, he said to Jin-ah, who drank some water but nodded, amused beyond words by the sight of Gina losing her freaking mind over her relative. Like, how? That's not how physics works. The girl released the lip of her bottle and grinned. It does for manhwa. Oh, please, I don't want to hear that. You're seeing it, she snickered as he tried to rebuke her but came up with nothing. I don't get it. I think it's one of those mysteries of the universe, Jin-ah chuckled. Guys get 20% bigger when they don't have their clothes on, probably some science in there. Maybe primal instincts, she joked. Sung Jin-woo rubbed the back of his head before looking down at his own top. I'm not vain, but I've also been doing my best to match Uncle. He shrugged and began to pull it off. Can you give me an honest opinion? He asked his sister as he finally removed his own top. Like, comparison-wise. Ju-hee wheezed out a breath before burning bright red and covering her face. I indecent, she squealed in her small corner of the world as Jin-ah sweat dropped before giving her brother an honest opinion. Well, for one, we both know you're different. Uncle's a lot broader than you, she said, getting a nod out of Jinwoo. But you're filling out, even your face has gotten a bit slimmer over the past year, and Jin-ah wasn't lying. Before her, Jinwoo's body could be called lean or even athletic compared to the scrawny boy he used to be a year and a half ago. He likely hasn't even noticed the other parts, either the fact he'd actually gained a few inches, the parts where his eyes grew more narrow, and even how he carried himself. You can watch everyone else's walk, but your own poetic, huh? That her brother was beginning to grow into his fighter role without even noticing. Jinwoo, meanwhile, looked surprised by that as he felt his face. Really? He'd always disliked his childish looks, so that was definitely a positive if it was true. I have to keep following Uncle's regime. Maybe I'll actually look my age in a couple years. Jinwoo laughed embarrassedly as Jin-ah laughed outright. Ju-hee just squealed in the fetal position. Yes, that day had begun a trend, if you will, of Gina and Juhee coming over more often, the two women showing up at their apartment a couple days out of the week. Even Jong-in and Hee-in had begun randomly showing up and were welcomed without issue. The newest additions to their lives had been welcomed so easily it was almost laughable. And a year later, Obaido decided to give Jin-woo a small sample of what it was like. Inside of a B-rank gate, Sung Jin-woo's eyes trembled at the sight of it. That bust-sized hole in front of him that emanated enough magical energy that even he, a lowly E-rank, could feel it. This is a B-rank? What are a ranks like? I can feel it. That's terrifying, he said to Obaido, who nodded. The now man had grown well with another year of training under his belt and experience in mind, but Jin-woo hadn't changed all that much as a person. He was still easily startled, but Obaido hoped he could show the now man true terror and power so he could understand and push forward. And also, with a year of him getting stronger, Obaido had given him something more personalized in combat attire. Wearing a pair of black boots, slightly baggy gray pants with special holsters for his newest iron knives, a dark blue tunic with the Hunter's Guild logo on the back, and some black hunter wraps for his hands up to his elbow, Jin-woo swallowed as Obaido nodded. His uncle hadn't changed at all, actually. Now 35, he still didn't look like he'd aged a day since they truly became a family 5 years ago. Wearing a skin-tight sleeveless dark gray top, black gloves, a pair of pants not dissimilar to Jin-woo's own in color and type, and some martial artist flats, Obaido nodded to him as he made them stretch before the gate. Coming up on their side, Hee-in and Jong-in nodded to the duo. "Are you ready?" the glass-wearing man asked. With the passing years, he changed up his own attire. In place of his previous clothes was an immaculate reinforced white suit with hardened leather pads and joint spots. His hips and his shoulders where a new red cloak sat combing over his side in a regal display with golden-plated pauldrons. Hee-in, meanwhile, had taken a couple pointers from Jong-in's own attire. Now adorned in a taut, reinforced, dark red suit with yellow lining and black accents on her sides, coat hem, and collar, she'd sort of reversed her usual armor placements. Instead of armor for her torso and abdomen, she now wore silver greaves and gauntlets, her new white gold pauldrons sitting well on her shoulders as cloth tassels hung from them and the breechcloth around her waist where a sheathed sword rested on its side. All in all, his rank sprung to mind the more he saw these two over the years. "Hyung-nim," Hee-in said as naturally as she breathed, a smile on her face as she addressed the two. "Sung Jin-woo, welcome. I hope you're open-minded about this experience," she said, looking from the nervous Jin-woo to the gate. "This is a B-rank gate. The dungeon on the inside will be dangerous, so it's to your benefit that you stay by your uncle's, or the tank's, side whenever possible." "You understood," Jin-woo said. "I'll be able to see something not even Juhee has, a B-rank dungeon. It's intimidating, but I can't let this chance go to waste." His eyes narrowed at the gate. "I will absorb as much as I can from this. I will get better due to this and make life easier on Shushu, help Mom, and make sure Jin-ah doesn't need to worry, even if that was mostly an emotional point instead of a literal one." Jin-woo just wanted his family happy, together, and taken care of. "All right," Obaido nodded as he stood up with his nephew. "When we get the time, I'll lead you through a formation against one of the monsters with a small team composed of Cheol, Kai-hoon, and Gina. You need to absorb all of this, nephew. This isn't a chance many people get." Jin-woo nodded, picking up a satchel off the ground and tying it around his waist as Obaido spun some thread together around his wrists up to his biceps, the creation looking like athletic sleeves to those not in the know. "All right, you too," Gina said as she adjusted her new giant gold-colored waist belt with a pair of pouches on the back, the woman's pointer fingers now sporting a pair of black bands. "You ready? I know Obaido's not been fighting inside a gate in a while," she added, shooting her fellow mage a look he shook his head at. "I haven't, not even the D-rank ones Jin-woo and Juhee have been doing. This will be a refresher course," Obaido said as he crossed his arms. "What about you? Prepared to test your newest ideas?" he asked her curiously as she nodded. I didn't think about using my powers in such a way," she nodded to Jin-woo. "I'll thank your sister once more when we get back. Woo, I didn't think I could push my powers like that." "Jin-ah's just glad to help," Jinwoo nodded. Now, let's go inside, the boys said nervously as Jongin agreed. All right, strike teammate, come forth, he called out to their large band of hunters. Normally composed of 11 A ranks and 6 B ranks, they'd added a bit more to the team temporarily for the sake of this expedition's newcomers. Kai-hoon, Chiol, and Gina nodded as they assembled by Obaido and Jinwoo, the C rank leading the charge of that small exploration team. It had been the idea that Obaido had suggested to Jongin before changing his occupation. Having a small team composed of individuals with strong escape skills, knowledge, or wide-area defensive abilities to scope ahead for a bit. With Chiol's experience and defensive barriers, Kai-hoon's high aptitude for close-quarters combat and hearing, Gina's improved telekinesis and spatial awareness, and Obaido's precise spatial thread and assassin-like speed and nature, they were perfect. Jinwoo's status as a fighter, no offense to him, wasn't really a factor, but Jongin already liked the idea of such a smaller team. Especially with the idea of himself being the part of one, so they could truly cover their bases beyond comparison. All right, Team 1, Obaido began as each member showed their spatial bands. We're going in. Chiol, be at the back of the group, he ordered. Gotcha, the other mature man said as he shifted behind Kai-hoon. Gina, you're at the center with Jinwoo. Make sure to keep your senses open. Understood, Gina said with a soldier's salute, belt shifting on its own power. Seeing him in action again is nostalgic, she smiled. Kai-hoon, you're to stay at Jinwoo's side during any combat or movement, Obaido said. As the youngest and most inexperienced, provide him the type of tanking that can only come from an A rank. Yes, sir, Kai-hoon grinned as he and Jinwoo nodded to each. Nice to meet you again, he greeted as they shook hands. Jinwoo smiled. Still not beat that level? He chuckled as Kai-hoon's eyes burned with righteous fire. Almost. I just don't get the system, he whined softly as they walked in, random bags of different sorts on their backs, hips, or thighs in Obaido's case. They entered that large blue portal that released a unique pressure only felt by gates. Entering a gate wasn't surprising to Jinwoo, but their surroundings did give him some pause. A waterfall? He blinked as the group recomposed themselves and looked about well. Standing on a lone giant rock, they could look around them to see water running down the nearby walls of the cavern they'd arrived in. Even below the edge of their decently sized plateau, they could see water falling from its moss-covered sides all the way down to a large lake below. Obaido cupped his chin. This is the second time we've been in a locale like this in the past half a year, he said to the other four. Really? Aren't there D-rank gates like this? Jinwoo asked the others. Yes, the lower gates are typically a lot more lenient in design, Gina said with narrowed eyes as she pulled a small ball from one of her pouches. But in higher-ranked gates, this usually means something here is going to thrive off these surroundings, and I don't just mean the water. Slimy walls, condensation, Chiol spoke up with crossed arms. Long drops into the water below, maybe even the stalactites above. This place could harbor a possibly diverse boss, he explained as Jinwoo looked surprised. Of course, the ranks of gates could easily make what he'd experienced up to this point moot. I didn't think about that, he admitted. It's fine. Gates of a lower nature, if you're not climbing the ranks on occasion, can harden your way of thinking, Chiol said. You need to make sure to always be prepared for different aspects, no matter what level. That can also be a bigger clue to the boss as well. Jinwoo nodded with narrowed eyes as the group walked towards one edge of their plateau. Let's see, there are 3 large holes across from us, Obaido said as he pointed to a far-off wall with said holes in them. What are the odds that they weren't made by the boss? Kai-hoon asked with a small sigh. Low, Gina said with a nod as she looked around them at the shining waters below. Is it amphibious? She wondered before kneeling down and placing her small metal ball into a crevice. I'm gonna spread my senses. Watch my back, she told the others as she placed her hands against the ground and closed her eyes. She expanded her telekinesis all the way down at half strength, an idea she'd gained from her previous days working with Obaido. By not forcing her powers like a tide, they could spread more easily, and she could probe her psychic ability for different things. She shook the metal ball, its vibrations adding to her senses and showing her more about the space below all the way down to half the plateau. As she did, Her brows furrowed a bit. There are small life forms inside the rocks, Gina told them. They've got magical energy that's oddly large for their size, though. She opened her eyes as she frowned. What could that mean? Kai-hoon wondered as Jin-woo cupped his chin. Large magical power in small beings? Well, maybe they had good stats despite their sizes. Wait, his eyebrows narrowed. Small, compact, and full of magic. That sounds kind of like one of those magic hand bombs, doesn't it? Jin-woo hissed out softly as the other's eyes narrowed. I've dealt with a few porcupine monsters that would shoot explosive quills. Mr. Song said he sensed their high magic power. In that case, there's a chance these small creatures, or even objects, will attack us at some point. Possibly, they're even connected to the boss, Obaido said before raising a hand. It glowed before thread shot from his glowing limb, the thin material shooting out across the expanse of what had to be at least 2 blocks to connect to the wall with the holes. They latched in deeply before the thread began to thicken into cables. Soon, the space between them gained small gapped thread plank paths. That's amazing, Jin-woo said in surprise as Obaido smiled at him. Uncle, you can do all of that quickly and easily. Yes, another upside to my power is that it's low cost even like this, Obaido said. I can make complex structures and items to use on the fly that can have many properties. I'll probably be showing you a bit more of my exploited power when we get to the boss. I think I'll bring out that skill. Gina tilted her head before making an ooh sound. Oh, right, thread. She tapped her noggin as Kai-hoon and Cheol scratched their heads with Jin-woo. Thread. What did he know about Obaido's thread that he'd use against a possible water-type boss? He wasn't sure. How much had his uncle exploited his powers? He wondered if he'd ever see the max. Still, they had a path now. So, with measured but trusting steps, they walked across the large lake below, the rushing water all around them a little loud, but not enough to drown out their voices or hearing. So, how big do you want to bet this place is? Cheol asked the others as he chose to hold onto his shield the whole way. This area alone is the size of a soccer field. It's got upper areas too if the waterfalls are to be believed, Kai-hoon said. Likely, it's about as big as a stadium in depth and height, Gina suggested. That water's gotta be deep, but it's not filling up all the way, so there's an exit somewhere. We might have ended up in a cave system of some mountain or forest in this world. Obaido agreed as he kept looking out and around. And then the 5 stopped at the sound of something exploding out of stone. Gina, Obaido commanded. The Orank mage's eyes closed as she held out her hands. An explosion rocked against a barely visible sphere that surrounded them, Kai-hoon's eyes narrowing in its direction before his ears twitched. From below, he shouted. Obaido's eyes snapped down and saw, between the thread of their pathway, dark blue dots within the water that erupted into flying triangular fish. They glowed before erupting against Gina's barrier like missiles, the half-American frowning as she lowered her hands after locking in her barrier. I guess you were right, she told Jin-woo appreciatively. Still, what did it? Why are they attacking now? Cheol's head turned on a swivel before he noticed something. Hey, remind me, when did shadows move on rocks? He growled as the group's heads snapped in the direction of such a phenomenon. That began moving fast. It's a chameleon? Jin-woo said in shock as that shadow moved with incredible speed before vanishing into the shadows up above. It's using the stalactites. Cheol had been onto something. We don't know if it's a chameleon though, Gina said before Obaido nodded. Get back to the platform, he declared as they began to run on the now fully solid path of thread. Midway, Kai-hoon's ears twitched and he grit his teeth. He jumped up an incredible distance before locking his shield against something that sparked on contact. What? He said in shock before being pulled back suddenly, a harsh swipe of air barely passing by his face. Hyung Nim, the orangutan said as Obaido brought him back down to the stone plateau. You're good, nice work, the thread user said as he looked around up above. That sound, Kai-hoon. It wasn't metal, skin, leather, or rock, the tank frowned before explaining it to Jin-woo. My dad's a tailor. He's dealt with all kinds of material before, and I've never heard any of those sounds, so it's likely scales, he realized as an echoing crackle of large lips reached their ears. Its mouth is likely composed of a similar material. Jinwoo was truly taken aback by this group's even non-magical abilities. These are high-rank hunters, he realized as he looked around nervously, mind still frazzled by the suddenness of the attack. But they'd recovered so easily, so fast, and used their senses to figure out their opponent. There was another sound of erupting earth before 8 of those exploding fish sprouted over the edges of their plateau and shot towards them. Before each and every one of them was sliced in half by an unseen attack, something so quick and precise the fish seemed to explode for no reason. Jinwoo went to Obaido's cross-armed form, the man not looking bothered in the least. And then there was a shift in the air that sent a tremble over their skin. Chiol skidded in front of the Uchiha with his glowing shield raised. "Flame barrier," he cried out. And a wall of gold formed, repelling a slimy thing with its surface that sent a hissing flame up a receding organ. "Confirmation, it is a chameleon," the B-rank tank said. "That wasn't a normal limb and it's slimy," he said, the man sounding like he frowned as the flames from his technique died out before even reaching their target. "And I think we can consider it a water element. The counter on my barrier is supposed to hit the target unless their nature combats my own." Obaido frowned at that. But something doesn't seem right. There'd been no rise in their invisible opponent's magical power when those fish were sent at them, right? "Ah, I see now," he realized as the group turned to him. "It's not one monster, it's 2. They're in a symbiotic relationship." As he spoke, the air hissed with numerous flying bomb fish, their numbers eclipsing their previous attempt by 3 magnitudes. Ha! A single sigh and the large number of projectiles were attacked and slashed in seconds, each and every one of those fishes not reaching the group even by 10 meters. "Efficient as always," Gina said as she raised her hand to the side and caught a bunch of the fish before they could crest the edge of the plateau. "Though you're rusty, I can tell." Those frozen fish were destroyed in an instant as Obaido rubbed the back of his head. "Once again, it seems so," he considered before slowly nodding. "Then, let me handle our opponents," Obaido told the group as he widened his legs and crouched low. "I should be able to handle 2 monsters like these." The ground erupted, the mage's form vanishing within it. "I don't get it, but I feel like he can kill those things," Chiol said with crossed arms. "All on his own." There was a wicked black spark from above. Senko. The top of the cavern erupted into lightning that flickered dark blue with a black epicenter. Kai, Hun, Chiol, and Jin Woo jumped at the attack as it ran rampant around the conductive cavern and tore apart a part of the ceiling. Hey, I thought it was spatial magic," Kai Hun said in shock as the area stopped shaking. "What's going on?" That's it," Chiol realized with a laugh. "It's both spatial and material magic, Kai Hun. He's applying his thread's properties, along with his spatial ones if I'm right." A large shadow dropped from above, the group watching its hissing shape fall before a random crack. In the air sent it crashing down on a far end of their plateau. Gina whistled as Obaido landed, his bound arms crackling with flickers of electricity. "Damn, I have not seen that in a while," she laughed as Jin Woo's jaw dropped. "Wait? How? That much electricity doesn't make sense," the youngest of the group said in shock and awe. "It's due to the special properties of my thread," Obaido told him as he let out a hot breath. The electrified creature twitched before its form slowly revealed itself within a mist of its illusion. "Well, Wu was partly right," Gina said as they looked at the clearly in shock creature, all pun intended. There, currently struggling to its 6 claws, was a creature with a chameleon's eyes and tail, but it was something more. Its large spiny form couldn't be mistaken. "A sea urchin?" Jin Woo gawked at it. But where is its tongue?" He didn't see it before it was already right in front of him, a thick fleshy organ that would have sent his head flying before it was held at bay by a single gloved hand. The floor beneath their feet cratered as Obaido tightened his gloved grip. "Be careful, Jin Woo," he said as Gina's form shot towards the still capable creature. "Don't let your guard down." "Yep," the mage woman agreed loudly as her hands glowed bright red and trailed just above the ground, strips of stone peeling off the ground as she circled the sea urchin. "Don't lag." The stone began to swirl around the sea urchin beast as it kept trying to recede its tongue to little effect and tugs. Gina shot back as her stone prison began to close in, her hands throwing something into the air in the center before they raised and came together as she landed. Binding. They gripped one another before the small metal ball floating at the center of it all pulled it all together at a point. The creature squealed as its body was crushed by brown stone, the gush of fluid from its body splattering over the ground beneath its stony coffin. Gina released a sigh of relief while Kai-hoon blinked in shock as Chiol cupped his helmeted chin. "You've been learning from him, haven't ya?" The B-ranked, but more experienced, Tank said with a single finger gesturing to the smirking Gina. "I'd be lying if I said no, so," she chuckled as Obaido nodded, impressed with her work. Before he switched over, me and Obaido didn't just sit around and drink beer, you know? We talked a lot about our powers and how they were different, similar, and then unique in attributes. Gina twirled a finger and a small number of pebbles followed suit. "I have telekinesis that can't match a national ranked hunter, but it has properties to it. For one, I can sort of imbue my telekinesis into things I touch. They're one-time uses, but it's more than I can use all at once." "Are really?" Jinwoo asked, holding onto his chest in shock. I would have died. Was even an injured magical beast such a threat? It began to dawn on him just how terrifying it was to be in a dungeon like this without being on guard. B-rank magical beasts, the area, the amount of advantages to note, this was why raiding parties were so large. To be caught in here without the right amount of experience, skill, or even senses would get someone or a team killed. And yet, Uncle was able to band together into a group of 4 who could do just that. Considering all he'd learned in the past 10 minutes they'd been in here, they're the pinnacle of their hunter ranks. 2 mages and 2 tanks could pull off so much when they were truly skilled. And then there was Obaido who seemingly could perform a powerful number of roles on the fly. Speed of an assassin. Magical might of a mage. The defensive skills of a tank. And just the physical capability of a fighter. Hell, the only thing the man was lacking was healer-based power, and Jinwoo was sure he would become beyond broken if he did have that. Unless he does have them, the man's brow trembled at the way too much his uncle had. "Uncle, you're ridiculous," Jinwoo said as Obaido sweat dropped. "And we're in," came the familiar voice of Jong-in as he entered the area with the rest of the original strike team. "Let's see, huh? Yes, you've all already taken care of the boss." The man seemed impressed. "Oh right, we forgot about the other," Kai-hoon began to realize with a shaky grin before the area rumbled. Crap. The cavern shook as the waters below swirled before rupturing as a beast of magnificent size breached. Its form slowly swam up the plateau's side, its glowing body cresting the edge before it shifted in the air above them, floating with its own power. It was whale-like with sharp barnacle-encrusted limbs and an odd dorsal fin one wouldn't find one the notable sea mammal. With its 4 pure red eyes, the 4 large hole-like barnacle mounds on its back, and the scaly-looking jaw it had, when the creature let out a bellow that caused the air to vibrate, well, Cha-hee-in already stood atop its noggin, her lone silvery blade plunged into its head. Jinwoo's eyes widened to impossible levels. "Wn, how did he didn't understand. He hadn't even seen He-in enter the dungeon, much less move up there. Hyung Nim's team really is something else," she told the magical beast as her weapon began to glow. "Truly, he's the oddest C rank around," He-in said as she flicked her blade beside Jinwoo and resheathed it. "There, done," she smiled as the man's jaw remained dropped, Jinwoo mechanically turning to see her smile. I'm done for today," he realized as the magical beast began to become covered in white marks that cleaved apart its form and reduced it to nothing but meaty chunks before it could even release a death cry. "HMPH, this is an odd ecosystem," Jong-in said with a hum and cupped chin. "How far did you all get into it?" he asked like he was talking about the weather. "The end of the bridge," Obaido said as he gestured to the still there construct. "We never got to go into those holes on the other side of this place, and I'm still worried about whether we killed the bosses or not." The S-rank mage nodded before gesturing to the Obaido-made path, the whole group going forward onto it. "Honestly, Hyung, are you sure your thread is so weak?" he asked, tapping their foothold. "It's spun together, it's not the same thing," Obaido explained. "It's as simple as adding more material and binding it together through simple rotation, no more, no less." "I guess doing this for clothing wouldn't work?" Gina asked him. Not for the kind I'd need to last. That was a curious phrase, huh? Likely another technique or something. She wouldn't be surprised. As they made it across the expanse, Jin Woo looked all around. I don't see the usual crystals and stuff, he said as he nodded. I don't either, she said to Jong-in, who cupped his chin before looking down at the waters below. Perhaps they're in the water? He offered the group as half of them looked through Obaido's bridge's railing to stare at the glowing liquid below. If this place is water-based, that wouldn't be impossible, Jong-in explained as one of their ranks pulled out a throwing knife and dropped it over the edge. They watched as it fell before plunking into the water. The area below glowed with a green light before a ring formed and allowed them a clear view of the environment's depths. I was right. We'll probably have to build a set of steps down so the other teams can do their jobs. Sunpeng, go and tell the other teams the situation and begin working with them to make a path down. One of their B ranks nodded before he blurred away like a phantom, his assassin status clear. 5 of you go with him, their members followed suit. All right, we'll slowly go through the tunnels and hopefully clear out all the monsters first and foremost, he nodded as the group continued on. Jin Woo was left intrigued as they traveled, fought, and even marked numerous parts of the cave system for the next 3 hours before the air grew intense. What the? He shivered as Chial pat his shoulder. That is the boss's mana. We're extremely close. Look at the ground, the B-rank tank said as Jin Woo did, and blinked in surprise at oddly perfectly angling trails of glowing water that, now that he was looking around, moved in perfect unison further down the slope they were on. This is a usual case for most bosses, Kai-hoon said with a nod. The thing is, powerful mana changes the environment around where its epicenter is. In that case, most boss rooms, or paths, are obvious when you keep a track of the mana around or just our surroundings. It's why mages are important to a lot of higher-ranked raids. Jin Woo hummed as they kept on moving. There's so much about raiding I don't understand yet, he thought as he watched their backs despite being in the middle of them all, eyes gleaming with the specific image of Obaido's. Yet, it's so amazing, he thought. The planning, the feeling of danger being circumvented by your comrades, and just the idea of being important to the whole. Jin Woo desired a future like that. One where he mattered and could move alongside a path of comrades. As they made it down the incline, they found themselves standing at a doorway. Obaido nodded to the group. This will likely be a bit bigger than the whale, he chuckled as he nodded, pouting. Please don't kill it all by yourself, he joked as she blushed at that, while the others snickered or looked hungry. All right, open the doors, Jong-in said as Obaido nodded. He pressed his hands against the two sides. They flung open with what looked like barely a push, the large stone tablets that had been blocking them flying back and slamming into a far-off wall. And what revealed itself in front of them was a humongous well of 50 meters with outcroppings popping out of the wall in a sporadic manner and a long string of light at the center of it, all that led all the way down to the bottom of an indiscernible height. It seems the boss is quite welcoming, Chiol snorted. Honestly, I'll never understand why some of these dungeons are like this. Is it not just the rarity of things? Kai-hoon considered with a shaky grin. I have more stories than I'd like to admit about unfair dungeons. The others either chuckled nervously as well, said the same, or smirked. So, how's this going to work? Jin Woo cupped his chin as he noted that, at the very least, a few of the platforms were close enough to work as their staircase. I wonder what the protocol here is. Same, Kai-hoon said with excitement. This is my first time working with the S ranks of our guild. I wonder if they've come up with different methods for this. Obaido, Jong-in, and he jumped off the ledge. What? Half the group shouted while their more experienced, with their leaders, members laughed. Gina let out a cackle as she wiped a tear from her eye. Even Chiol was left gawking at the madness before them. What the hell? Are they just like this? He asked in disbelief as Jin Woo and Kai-hoon's skin dropped a few shades. They're also our team's crazies, the rank mage said. Back with the falling trio, their hair flapped behind them as they fell without a care. I believe that's it, Obaido said as the three of them saw the waters below begin to bubble. A huge dark shadow formed over half the water's surface below before it ruptured and released a large, long, bellowing eel of some sort covered in crystals that made it look more like a monster made of stone than a living organism. It shot up towards them as they fell down at it. "Any ideas?" he asked over the wind with a pout. "I was admonished for selfishness," she twitched her fingers, "and so I'd like to hear better concepts." Obaido chuckled at that as the thread around his arms sparking, surprising he for all of a second before she shot him a flat look. "Simple immobilization. They need experience against big bosses," Obaido said as they reached the crystal eel, his arms reared back. "Nai Senko." Up above, the slowly descending team jumped as electricity crawled up the wall, carving into the stone surface, before erupting into small explosions of light that left heated air in their wake. "Huh?" someone asked. When?" Gina chuckled as she carried Jin Woo down faster than the others, the man's arm around her shoulder with hers around his waist. "Your uncle's incredible, huh?" she told him with a grin as they landed halfway down and watched the chaos down below. "The more time I fight alongside him, I can't help but wonder where he bottoms out, if you get my drift. Where his skills actually land him." They floated down with their bodies covered in a red glow. "I've wondered that for a while, too," Jin Woo smiled the closer they got. "Uncle's got so many things and he cultivated all of them. It makes you wonder if you can do the same thing, you know?" he admitted bashfully. "Yeah, I get that." They landed on a thick black thread that spanned the entirety of the walls in a circle, Obaido appearing beside them. "There, that should keep this thing more doable," he chuckled as he crossed his arms, Gina nudging him a bit. "Finally work off the rust?" she giggled as he ran a hand through his hair. "I feel like it, yeah? I might need to make sure to actually raid with you all every now and then to keep my skills up to date. We'll welcome ya anytime." Jin Woo took a deep breath before blinking as thread climbed up his boots, hands and arms, chest, joints, and neck. "There, you should be able to handle yourself even if only a bit," Obaido told him as he pat the man's back, his thread even crawling up his iron knives and causing their edges to spark. "Go and experience a threat bigger than most you've faced." Jin Woo's eyes widened at that before he clenched his hands and nodded. "Thanks, Shushu, for everything," he smiled. And then jumped off with determined eyes, feet held down and making first contact on the crystal eel's hissing hide, the beast wriggling as Jong-in and he stood off to the side with observing eyes. They wouldn't help them fight and would intervene only when it was necessary. Jin Woo's eyes glowed a powerful hue. This was his moment to grow. Obaido watched with proud eyes as Jin Woo arced about the crystal eel's hide, powerful slashes of the new adult's enchanted iron knives carving into what was left of the crystal hide and doing more than he'd ever been capable of before. Gina wrapped an arm around his waist and gave him a bit of a hug. "You believe in him a lot. I can't imagine how much that means to him," she chuckled as Obaido rubbed the back of his head with one hand but held her to his side with the other. "Tilda, Gina grinned as he raised a brow. "So, being honest, how long?" "Oh, well," her cheeks colored, but she considered her answer. "Maybe 2 years?" "2 years?" She laughed at him, hugging him closely. "Yep, do you have any idea the type of effect you have on a gal? I mean, I know you can be a bit dense at times, but you really do need to grasp the power you wield," Gina added on with a teasing smirk as Obaido rolled his eyes. Yes, well, if you'd like to give us a try." "I thought you'd never ask." Obaido chuckled at that as they watched their other newer members descend from above, attacking the dungeon boss without hesitation. It was only the next day that they'd revealed they were giving dating a shot. And the reactions were, well, outside of expectations. "Oh God, really? My bet's finally come through." "Yeah." Obaido's sweat dropped while Gina blushed and muttered something, his eyes shining with wonder as she slowly shimmied over. "Really?" she whispered in awe and interest as the mage woman blushed harder but nodded with a shaky grin. "Why, yeah, we older folk are giving dating a shot," she said with a bit of a stutter. "Just, don't want anyone getting freaked out or anything, but now I'm learning people have been placing bets on us for years." Gina's sweat dropped. "So, obviously, I'm flattered." Obaido snorted as Jong-in patted his shoulder. I'm happy for you. Hyung, the glasses-wearing S-rank smirked. Well, one of you had a normal reaction, the Uchiha chuckled. They'd revealed it to the siblings after work. Ju-hee even there for the reveal after she and Jin-woo came back from their raiding for the day. Wait, you're dating? Jin-ah balked as Gina blushed, but nodded all the same. Ju-hee gasped with big bright eyes. Tell us how it happened, she squealed as the older woman cleared her throat but laughed regardless. It's not that crazy, but sure. Working in the kitchen, Jin-woo was surprised. Huh? Well, congratulations, uncle, he smiled as Obito reciprocated one back. I knew you two were close, but I guess I didn't really understand how deep that went. I suppose that just speaks of my ignorance in romance, Jin-woo, Obito said with a hum as he chopped some onions. Kyung-hai wanted to pair me up, a worrying amount at that, when I first came down here. You two probably didn't know, but she set me up on a few dates over the years that didn't work out. The younger man was surprised beyond words, but not unaware of his mother's tendencies. Haha, Mom really is like that, huh? Jin-woo smiled as he oiled a pan. Well, I'm sure she'd love to meet Gina Nuna. I'm sure she would. And so 2 years passed. And a fateful day came onto Jin-woo's shoulders. You're going to get your rank checked after today? Ju-hee asked as she and Jin-woo stood before the gate. It was supposed to be a weak one, another D-rank gate that they'd handle together with their usual rating group. Yeah, Jin-woo nodded. I want to see how far I've come in actual words, or if I just need to find my own way into a higher rank. He smiled at her, and she blushed a bit before huffing and turning her head away from him. Hee, he grinned. Ah, you two finally ready for us old guys to arrive, came a joking voice as the two turned to face the oncoming rest of their party. Mr. Song, Jin-woo smiled as the middle-aged man before him laughed a bit. Song Kai-yul was a man of moderate height, maybe an inch or two above Jin-woo's own, with slightly wrinkled fair skin, narrow brown eyes, and slicked-back dull orange hair. Wearing a blue coat, white dress shirt, black pants, and some boots, a sword bounced off his waist as he pat both younger members on their shoulders. We'll be in your care again, Ju-hee, Kai-yul said with a nod to the healer. And no issues, she declared with a nod. Jin-woo, I need you to mind our right again, the middle-aged man said to the rank E fighter who nodded. Always, he said as his knives hung off his backpack. Still, Mr. Song, Jin-woo blinked at the gate. The other two turned their heads to it, raising a brow at Jin-woo's look of worry. Maybe it's just me, but doesn't it seem weird? Off. Ju-hee looked at him and then back at the gate. Is it? She asked, worried. Kai-yul cupped his chin as he walked ahead a bit, looking all around it. It doesn't seem to be emanating any odd mana, he told the fighter who rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry. No, it's fine. You've been in bigger gates than this, Kai-yul smiled, relaxed. Ever since, you seem to have a knack for odd situations. Don't discount that just yet. You're 50% right, he joked as Jin-woo's sweat dropped. Thanks, sir, he said with a weak grin. Perhaps, Jin-woo considered as he slowly awoke in his medical bed to the relieved looks of his uncle and sister. Perhaps he'd have lived a simpler but no less fulfilling life if he'd taken his own feelings to heart and tried harder to stop the others from entering the double dungeon. Maybe he'd have slowly risen up the ranks as an experienced fighter. Looking back on it from the future, though, Sung Jin-woo was likely destined for the path he'd end up on. To find an impossible system that'd give him opportunities to live out his wildest dreams at the cost of any normalcy. The ability to soar far above his station, all for the sake of reaching a peak no one else would be at. He'd likely follow that path. At least, he should have. Jin-woo smiled as Jin-ah cried messy tears he wiped away. But he had more than that hypothetical him, didn't he? Obito sighed in relief as he pressed their foreheads together. More and more, he'd gained a foundation that he'd never lose. Ju-hee entered the room and they locked eyes. The healer's puffy red gaze trembled again. So much more. Hyung, you sure you're all right? Jin-ah asked as Jin-woo sat up with a roll of the shoulder. You were asleep for 3 whole days and... I was? The man looked alarmed as Obito nodded. Ju-hee swallowing as she sat down on his other side. I don't. All I remember is, well, that thing in the air, somewhat, Jin-woo said unsurely. Obaido and the others looked up, confused, as Jinwoo blinked at their confusion. Wait, you guys can see it right? See what? Ju-hee asked nervously, clenching her medical gown's hem. Why, you almost died. Maybe you're not feeling well? She asked, concerned. Jinwoo frowned at that, observing that box. That dialogue box. Message box. You have unread mail. Obaido cupped his chin as his eyes narrowed. You do see something. What does it say? He asked as Jin-ah wiped her eyes while looking at the nothing there. Crazily enough, Wu began, looking nervous. It looks like some kind of game dialogue. It says I have unread mail? He said nervously as the others balked. Jin-ah, do you remember how this kind of stuff worked in MMOS? Eh? The young woman looked alarmed and nervous. Well, duh, you'd open it. Okay, open mailbox whoa. Jinwoo blinked again as Obaido's eyes transformed. What the, let me read what it says now. Welcome, player unread. Daily quest, preparing to become strong has arrived. Telling them the words, the group looked alarmed as he swallowed. Should I read it? If it's like in games, and you're not crazy, Jin-ah stressed very seriously. There's probably stuff inside of it. What is happening? She tried to keep her cool, but it wouldn't work. He's saying he had a game's UI? What? I think, Obaido began to say, gaining the group's attention. I think you've gotten that. You've double awakened, nephew? And this is how it looks to you. What? That doesn't sound like it makes sense. Ju-hee swallowed as Jinwoo nodded rapidly, eyes going to the message in the air once more. Your aura has changed, Obaido said. There's something there that I can't make out. It's vague and large, too large. As in, he didn't see the end of it, the more his eyes flickered around to the black power spreading across the ground and out the room. What had happened to his nephew? Alarm. System will help players' growth. Alarm. If he fails to obey the system's orders, there may be a penalty. Alarm. Your rewards have arrived. Obaido's eyes narrowed. Penalty? And what would count as something like that? He frowned as Jinwoo followed suit. Maybe I am a bit tired, but if this is true, he swallowed before opening the quest. This has to be a joke, Jinwoo sweat dropped. What is it? Ju-hee had officially hit the bottom of the I have no idea what's going on well. The daily quest is seemingly some kind of workout regimen. And on the bottom, it says that if I don't complete it, I'll get hit with the appropriate penalty. What are they? Jin-ah asked, suddenly nervous. It has to be me being tired because it's a 100 push-ups, squats, curl-ups per arm, and a 10 kilometers run. This is stupid. Woo, Obaido began as he stood up and held his nephew's shoulder. No matter what, never take a threat as a joke. We don't know what's going to happen to you if your powers are a bit more esoteric and sentient in design. Let's just do the exercises once you get out today. And just then, the doors to the room opened up to allow in a pair of men. Both wearing black suits, shoes, and ties, they strode forward before standing at the side of the bed, one nodding to the group. Mr. Sung, he began with a look over the admitted man's form. Nothing's off about him, but something had to be up. Having slicked back light tan, slightly orange, hair, fair skin, and eagle-like eyes, the man handed him his card. The inspectors, Obaido spoke up, expression apathetic as he and the man locked eyes. This is that other weird one who'd have thought the two would be related. Good evening, I hope we're not interrupting too much. We simply have a few questions and we'll be on our way. I'm surprised you'd want to meet me, sir, Jinwoo said as he observed his card. Wu Jin-chul. Yes, we do on account of the double layer incident, Jin-chul said as Ju-hee flinched, eyes dimming as he frowned mentally. I'm sorry for bringing it up, but it needs addressing, ma'am. Situations like the one you and Mr. Sung were in aren't normal. Especially not with the results, he frowned off to the side as Obaido's eyes closed. I'm simply of the mind that this isn't normal and that you, Sung Jin-woo, his eyes locked with the bedbound hunter, maybe have double awakened. I was of the same mind, Obaido said, gaining both men's surprise and interest. Just in time to make them miss the other's reactions, but Jin-woo's shake of the head got the female's attention. He mouthed secret and focused on the conversation. Yes, you were the first on the scene, Chol said with slightly narrowed eyes. We'd contacted the White Tigers Guild at the time, they'd been the closest and the right choice. Yet, this C-rank hunter had arrived on the scene first amongst all else and entered the gate without warning. His testimony had been curious. All we found in that room was you on an altar, clothes torn and uninjured, but nothing else. What? Juhi's head snapped up at his words, getting a nod out of the man. She considered the situation before grimacing. They were there. We know, had it been a shift in testimony from you all, we might have been able to chalk it up as simple stress and mistakes, Jin Chol frowned deeply. But that's not the case. All of you saw those things, the dungeon wasn't anything less than a rank, and you all barely survived with Mr. Sung being the only one who stayed back. You being alive was a miracle despite how thin that line was, sir, and that's what leads us to believe you've double awakened. The other man brought out a golden instrument with a purple gem at the top. What will this reveal? Vito thought with a furrowed brow as Jin Woo put his hand down on the purple crystal. And what will I have to do to keep him safe? With that other member holding up a black box connected to the glowing contraption, he blinked at it as a set of numbers slowly flipped onto the screen, and came back with a curious result. That's curious, he said, his only slightly surprised reaction getting raised eyebrows around the room. You were originally set with a magic power level of 10, correct? Why, yeah? No, it's nothing wrong. We saw your application to get your rank retested from the day before. Jin Woo made an O sound. We didn't expect much, no offense, but it seems you might have done something or some such because your magic power is 130. It went up? Jin Woo asked, excited by the prospect before slumping at his sister's raised brow. Bro, that's not exactly high, you know, Jin-ah said. Still, he raised it over 13 times. She wondered if his training had something to do with this, and/or if it was because of his double awakening. It seems like it was for no reason. Then, Jin Chol said even as his eyebrows rose. He was originally just 10. That's rather odd if not impressive. Hunter stats were usually set in stone, with some margin for improvement upon their awakening. Mostly, mages could increase their magic power readings by getting better, but Jin Woo was a fighter class. At least, he didn't seem to have had enough magic power in the first place. Curious, his eyes went to the curious Obito, giving Jin Woo his own praises and compliment, the older man's eyes closing as he did. And then there's you, this other odd prospect. The chairman had even been rather intrigued by him for some reason, the Hunters Association head always looking kind of nostalgic about Obito Uchiha. Anything they could find on the Chinese-Korean man had been that he had an unfortunate accident with his father's death around 8 years ago before he moved to Seoul around 7 years ago. He'd been one of those ones at the beginning, a man whose magic wasn't fully understood despite his demonstrations being documented by every random reporter. We'll take our leave, he said to the four as he got up, the doors to the room opening to allow in a huffing Gina, the woman taking one look at the group and sighing in relief as she walked over. Got him it, Woo. Your uncle basically rips out the boss's heart and leaves us standing around like idiots. At least, I thought so until I heard the news, she said as Jin Chul's mind whirled. Apologies, Obito said with a bashful smile she sweat dropped at. Boyfriend, you really don't make sense sometimes, Gina said as she came over and nodded to the group before noting the inspectors. Little issue, ma'am. We were just getting testimonies on the event, the other inspector said as she hummed but nodded in the end. All right, well, damn, I hope everything's all right. It is though Mr. Sung did do a good bit of training over the years and raised his magic power. Really? Haha, good job, Woo. Thanks, Nuna. I'm glad my efforts are going somewhere despite the weird training uncle came up with, Jin Woo said with a nervous sweat going down his brow as Obito nodded knowingly. You're actually pretty crazy, Shushu. Crazy gets you places, sometimes, Obito said as the inspectors began to leave. Jin Chul's ears were prepped as Gina took a seat. Standing outside the door and slowing their walk, his eyes narrowed at an interesting bit of info. You don't just do what Obai did. You too. This man of mine really just left the four bosses dead for the sake of hurrying out. Sorry about that, uncle. It's fine. I see someone wasn't showing their full power. Yet, how? Was it some new equipment? But that shouldn't have been possible. Obito Uchiha hadn't actually bought or registered equipment over the past 5 years. In fact, the man had only some daggers in the beginning that his nephew had inherited, but nothing else besides a few he bought for the younger man. Something tells me, Jin Chul thought slowly as he and his co-worker hurried out. You're hiding something, C rank, he said to himself. Meanwhile, back in the room, Obito filled Gina in on the situation. The fuck? She asked as the others looked sheepish. How in the world are you just going to say that and act like it's normal? Gina's jaw dropped as Jin Woo blushed. To be fair, it's kinda crazy to just say out loud, he said. Exactly. Freaking, okay? So, you hid that, obviously, she said as Ju-hee bit her lip. Think about it, Ju-hee, that kind of situation isn't normal even for those rare folk who've reawakened. It'd be a bad idea to just out-woo like that. She perked up before looking embarrassed, the older woman patting her shoulder with a nod. So, you opened up those messages yet? NRK tilde. Officially signing Jin Woo out of the hospital had been done with a little pressure from the older hunters, but they'd gotten through with it in the end. 30 minutes later, the group were in the Sung home, the 5 sitting in the living room as Jin Woo and Obito did his supposed daily quest tasks. Thankfully, we could just run home, Jin Woo said with a huff as he finished his last push-up. And done, he declared as he let out a sigh before wiping his chin. That's thankfully not so. There was a ding at his side, the young man blinking in confusion. Well, I completed the rewards. You get those? Ju-hee, and Gina balked as Obito sat up with a nod. I've no good game knowledge, but I figured it might happen. It was that, or you got those skill point things, he said before Jin Woo's mouth trembled with a shaky grin. There are 3 things I get, Jin Woo said with a shaky smile. Oh, one of them is skill points. Wait, no, that's BS, Jin squealed. That's not fair, and you get those every day. That's what it looks like. Gina cupped her chin while Ju-hee looked confused. What's the first one? The healer asked. It's called status recovery, Jin Woo said as Obito hummed. Hit it, he said. Doing as told, the group watched as a golden glow flashed over Jin Woo before it fell away to reveal a completely clean young man whose jaw dropped. Ju-hee wheezed as Gina blinked. Jin nearly fell out of her. So, this is real, she asked, officially convinced as Obito nodded. So it seems. Woo, what kind of things can you put these skill points into? The oldest in the room asked. Status. Name, Jin Woo level 1. Job, none fatigue 0. Title, none. HP 500. MP 188. Strength, 25 vitality 20. Agility, 23 intelligence 15. Sense, 15. Remaining points, 3 inches. That's insane, Gina said in disbelief after he told them what was up. Wait, so those are your base stats, right? She asked curiously. I think so, Jin Woo rubbed the back of his head. So, what should I put my skills into? That got a blank-faced room if it ever did. So, sense might be spatial awareness and stuff, right? Jin asked. All of the others make more literal sense, but that stat isn't really explained. I don't know if there's a help menu. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. Obito considered it all. Then, he began, gaining the room's attention. Let me ask you, Woo, what path do you wish to follow? Jin Woo blinked, confused. You, uncle? From what I understand about games, and the fact that you have stats and a level, the man emphasized as the others gasped. That means you, amongst all others, can become stronger than even you know. But you're at the beginning of your journey, nephew. What appeals the most to your situation? What are you in need of to progress your goals? The younger man's eyes widened as he looked back at the system before frowning. I don't know, he admitted to the room. This is a once-in-a-lifetime ability that I understand, but I don't know what to do. Do I tell people one day? Do I hide it for my entire life? Jin Woo asked the room, looking more nervous as he spoke. I just want to wake Mom up and make you and Nuna, everyone, proud. How do I do that? Jin Ah's eyes widened at that before she looked down with clenched fists. Why, you have a better chance at it than anyone else, maybe, she said, gaining his attention as Ju-hee's eyes remained transfixed on the horribly worried and anxious man. Hadn't he always pushed her forward in the past? Hee, I think you can do a lot. I know I can't do the things you can do, Jin-woo told her as she healed his cut arm. Maybe if I had, and no, it's nothing. What? Ju-hee asked him. You have a great power, Miss Ju-hee. I think you just need time to see that. He'd been thinking about his mom then, too, hadn't he? She thought before looking down in thought, fists quaking. I'm not like him, she didn't have his training. His perceptiveness, his physical prowess, his courage. Ju-hee was more of a coward than anyone. She's sure her class made that apparent. I know you can do it, she told him, gaining his attention. I don't have the same drive as you do, but I've seen how you are, the healer said as Gina's eyes softened. I think you have a greater chance, now more than ever, to find a way to be who you want to be. His eyes widened at that, eyes snapping to his screens before he swallowed. I'm sorry for my outburst, he said, apologizing in full. I've got a real worthwhile power now, but I have to do something with it. I'm fumbling over something as little as a stat increase like an idiot when I should be focusing on what I want to do. Games are so diverse, Jin-woo thought out loud as Obaido pat his shoulder. I think that you just need more time, Jin-woo. It's been one day and your mother is still under great care. We have all the time we need. You're right, both of you, he said, nodding to the embarrassed-looking Ju-hee. I need to take advantage of this, all of it, to the best. So, I guess if it's following game logic, he began with a shaky grin as Jin Ah swallowed. Why, you're going to try and raise your level, right? She asked as he nodded. I don't know what else I'll get, remember? There's still that random box I get for my third daily quest reward. Speaking of. He accepted it and found a virtual-looking box in his hands. Can you guys see this? He asked them, clenching his hand to show them the attempt at trying to grasp something. Why, yeah, actually, Gina blinked in confusion. The feel from that thing is almost like a dungeon, not in concept, obviously, but the energy within it. It feels like a high-ranked mage's power, actually. A mage? How to put this, Obaido began. With mages, we have higher sensory skills as you know. The thing is, when we're feeling others' magics, we can tell they're similar to some monsters' skills we've met. For example, I've fought fire monsters that Jong-in's magic feels like. I've fought some ice folk, Gina added. Some with thunder, others with air powers. It's a big cauldron of energy. So, this might be a mage like Reawakening? Jin-woo wondered. Wasn't Dad a fighter? Why would I get this? It's not like that kind of stuff is locked in, you know? Jin Ah offered. I've been looking at bloodline stuff and, well, while it'll be the majority, a fighter's family can still have a mage or assassin in it. Duh, uncle? They're more likely to have a tank, you know, but it's possible. Open. The box undid itself under his careful gaze, the young man's eyes narrowing as it broke apart to reveal. Bandages. I feel so robbed. Jin Ah snorted as Gina laughed, Ju-hee blinking at the result before giggling a bit. Obaido shot the younger man a patient smile. Give it time, he said. The next 2 days were just spent doing the usual daily quest workouts and focusing on trying to understand this system. And they had quite a few things, actually. Huh, my iron knives, shoo-shoo, Jin-woo said as he and the man sat in the living room. It's got stats. Item, iron knives. Type, daggers. Attack plus 5 agility plus 8 inches. I see, I guess you'll have to get more interesting equipment. Thankfully, this isn't so odd, you understand, Obaido said as Jin-woo nodded. Materials, magical items, and equipment were already both accepted terms, but understood things. This was basically just putting that understanding into explainable words and numbers. I think I know what I'll do now, Uncle, Jin-woo said as he looked at his status menu and put all his points into strength and sense. I'll keep my sense stat up half the amount of my strength. Status. Name, Jin-woo level 1. Job, none fatigue 0. Title, none. HP 500. MP 180. Strength, 31 vitality 20. Agility, 23 intelligence, 15. Sense, 18. Remaining points, 0 formerly 9. Alright, that sounds good, Obito smiled as Jinwoo nodded. Still, some of your stats clearly come into play, eventually. Like MP, is that a stand-in for magic points? He asked as his nephew chuckled. I think we should spend more time going over games. His eyes went flat. Uncle. Better to remember now than later. Now, what about your reward box? Getting the item, he opened it, expecting another lackluster item. And getting an instant dungeon key. His jaw dropped as Obito's own narrowed with glare. There you go, something interesting, the man said with a focused tone. Item dungeon key. Item class E. A key that allows you to create an instant dungeon. You may use this in the third entrance of Hapjeong Station. It gives you a location? Obito asked, utterly confused. I mean, most games do that, Uncle, Jinwoo said. But the world isn't a game, correct? The air grew silent as the two began to grow nervous. Oh shit. His uncle had given him a good idea after they chose to ignore that existence-breaking question. 3 days later, on a Saturday, Obito and Jinwoo looked down at Hapjeong Station. With his strength and sense now at 37 and 21, respectively, he adjusted his clothes. You're getting good at working with materials, Uncle, Jinwoo said as he stretched in his blue muscle shirt, black shorts, and normal sneakers, the bandages he'd gotten from his first reward box wrapping both his arms up to his elbows. I feel so much tougher now, he added, his iron knives on his hips, but with a new add-on. So, smithing exists? Maybe? Item, Beast Altered Iron Knives. Type, Dagger. Attack plus 8 Agility plus 14. With a new dark blue bladed edge, both his weapons made him feel ridiculously powerful. I'm glad I could try and they worked out, Obito said from beside him. Wearing a tighter pair of clothes compared to his nephew, the man adjusted his gloves as they began to walk down the steps. So, how sure are we that you can, you know? Jinwoo asked him, minding the people around them. What if this is a me-only thing, like a special event? I'll have to try. Maybe it'll be like I said, so you just need to go to the right spots if I can't slip in when you go in. The younger man nodded as they kept going until the third flight of stairs, the moving people around them growing scarce in number. Activating his item, Obito's sharingan blazed as he watched his nephew step through a distortion that just formed ahead of him. All right, Obito thought as he moved to walk in and reached out his hand in a show of scratching his head. And hit a wall of sorts. We were right, these dungeons that the system might have created were Jinwoo specific. But you're not able to escape my eyes, which meant one more particular part of his skill set was useful here. One no one else in his guild, Sans Jong-in, knew about. One of his S-rank skills. Obito walked down the steps, bypassing that invisible portal before hurrying into the third floor's bathrooms. His ears peaked and he nodded at the lack of people before he went into a stall and held out his hands. They clawed up as he glowed a powerful blue, the magical aura slipping off his skin and going down his arms towards his thread-spilling fingers. His spatial thread was likely a sort of altered holdover from his previous life. The magical material began to spiral in a circle. Kamui, his greatest skill from his life as a shinobi. The circle began to glow blue, more and more thread forming a boundary in that altered space where he saw Jinwoo. A power to move between dimensions. He began to pull his hands apart, the clenching fingers fighting against something in the air that fought against him. His sharingan rotated before the left one began to bleed the more he pushed it. This is different compared to a normal gate, Obito thought as he pulled his arms apart more and more. There's a power here that's bigger than even the lower-ranked gates. His eyes narrowed. His muscles bulged as he pulled and pulled before he reached the crescendo. He ripped them back, and a glowing blue portal formed ahead of him, the man sighing in relief as he used some toilet paper to wipe at his eyes. I'm coming, he whispered as he entered. Instant dungeon. Jinwoo's eyes widened in shock and awe at that new glowing portal, one that allowed a sighing figure through and into this crazy world. Obito smiled for his grinning nephew. Was it tough so far? Aye, it was. In the beginning, Jinwoo smiled as he held up his bloody knives. But you protected me like always. Anytime, any day, any dimension. You bet your ass I'm gonna find a way to help all of you, the younger man laughed. Alright, so, what really happened? Jinwoo explained the situation up to now. Of the colors in monsters' names, their danger levels, their dropped items, and more. By the end, he read out his new level. Level 3, and each level gains you a collective 5 points. You have skills. Jinwoo nodded, explaining each concept as best he could. Muscularity LV 1, Sprint LV 1, and another one called Dagger Arts LV 1. Those 3 alone already impressed the older brunette. So, I'm guessing you've chosen your path, or not yet? Jinwoo wore a sad smile as he clenched his daggers closely. Dad used to use daggers, right? Both of you. I want to use these, too, and take that to its peak. Obito smiled. Following that, though, the two went through the floors, tore through the monsters, collected more items, and more. All the while, Jinwoo noted his sense seemed to be peaking with each of his uncle's attacks. It's interesting, he thought as he carved through a steel-jawed red wolf with a cleave of his right dagger, the other one locking with the jaws of another so he could bring the pommel of the first down onto its head. It died as he noted another level. I guess without me killing everything, I get less XP, he wondered. Could he take on the boss alone? Was that possible with his current prowess? They kept going, the monsters growing more numerous and dangerous as they did, but with skill, speed, and awareness, they killed them with efficiency. Obito was surprised by this fact as well. He's growing so strong in a good way. The reawakened man's movements had grown sharper and more precise, the Uchiha guessing his growing skill in daggers, his dagger arts, giving Jinwoo the skill he needed. But that wasn't everything. They landed after another mob kill, looking down another set of stairs where a decently strong, to Jinwoo, aura emanated from. Obito felt it out and wasn't really bothered, like, at all. Jinwoo's eyes went to his uncle's casual raised brow. Uncle? Yes. I want to fight it alone. Obito closed his eyes in thought at the idea. Is he strong enough? Obito didn't know. Jinwoo had always been a studious man ever since receiving his tutelage. The man was smart, wise to the gates and their threats, and even a stubborn fool like him. He had good skills and now a new power set that would, likely, set him apart from everyone else in strength. And I'll be there every step of the way, he thought. All right, Obito smiled for him and Jinwoo grinned happily. I want to show you how far I've gotten, through power and skills, the younger man said as Obito nodded. Let's go. Taking their first steps down, they continued on into this odd space that seemingly extended beyond normal. Well, dungeon aesthetic, Jinwoo offered him as Obito shrugged. It's the world of these things. Really, we can only assume so, he said. By the time they reached the final platform, they found a swamp. With the area looking eroded by the sticky-looking waters, green moss, and humid air, Jinwoo looked further ahead as his eyes glowed. There he is, he uttered as Obito remained by the staircase. I can do this, Jinwoo thought as he looked all over that dark blue serpent that came further into the corridor. It had dark blue scales with some orange ones on its side, a thick-looking hood, yellow eyes, and thin black eyes. I can tell, your scales will just ignore my daggers, the fighter thought with a glare. My dagger arts, though, might give me the type of attacks I need. The skill system within his power was seemingly based on skill experience and usage. He'd gotten sprint from using high-speed lunges and movements off walls and the like for quick attacks. So, he assumed that he'd get a sort of dagger skill with enough focus, usage, and intent. The only parts of you that I can hit that will do damage are your mouth, eyes, and maybe under your hood. The snake let out a ground-quaking screech that pushed back the duo's hair and clothes, but to little more effect. Obito crossed his arms with his sharingan ablaze. I can see its name, like with the other monsters though, comparatively. This one was more clear. Swamp's ruler, Blue Poison Fangs, Rasaka. It was a white name as far as he could discern. And then it moved with the speed reminiscent of the wolves and beasts. That kind of speed. For its size, it tore apart the surroundings by just moving, the snake's head thinning like a missile. Wu was already above it, form landing on the ceiling. I can see you, he thought as he kicked off it to dodge another one of that creature's passes. I can see you. He landed on the train tracks before running down its length, the snake behind him. Rasaka gave chase at a higher speed than he could muster, the man's eyes narrowing as it began to shoot towards him in a straight line. Perfect. He hopped mid-run, turning in the air as his feet began to touch the floor. Sprint. He shot down the rushing snake's side, dodging its vicious fangs and bringing his knives down its side as he kept sprinting down its flank. By the end of it, he jumped up and over its lashing out tail before landing on the side of the platform, eyes locking onto Rasaka's returning slither with a frown. The marks down the side of it, they were skin, or really scale, deep. He'd been right earlier, he only had so many options. As it returned, though, he noted its slower, more cautious pace, its expanded hood a good indicator. Ha! He released a small grin as a blue glow formed over him. You're worried now, aren't you? Because he could hurt it. And if he could hurt, he could kill. He erupted from his spot as its head slammed into it, rupturing the platform but snagging nothing as a sharp pain ran down its side. Rasaka let out a hissing cry as Jinwoo hopped off its scales and landed on the roof again. With Sprint LV-1 still active, he ran down it before jumping off to land on the other side of the tracks. He held his knives up in front of him, crossed with the edges glowing a wicked blue that confused him before another window popped up. Item: Beast Altered Iron Knives. Type: Dagger. New: Effect Beast Eater, deals 20% bonus damage to beasts. His eyes glowed an ephemeral hue as his body hissed out a blue aura. Good. Rasaka lunged at him with a bleeding side before finding the low-ranked hunter below its body on the tracks, before he unleashed a series of crossing cuts that spilled blood. Enough to color his blade and pants leg before he was moving around it with more. More. Fight more ferociously. More. Cut off its strong points. More. Jinwoo's daggers slashed across the snake's eyes as it released another screech. Getting hit by a reckless head slam, he cratered the wall behind him. It hurts, but I can keep moving. He plunged both his blades into the snake's noggin. It began to swing its head around, screeching, but he held true even as he was slammed into walls, the roof, and the floor. He bit in with all his might as he clenched up his knees to keep its damn mouth shut. With each slam, his weapons sunk in more and more before it began to slow down. Bloody, broken, cut, and wounded, Rasaka the blue poison fang's head hit the ground as he finally released it. Landing on shaky feet, a pair of hands settled him on his shoulders, Obaido leaning into view with a nod. Amazing work, he praised as Jinwoo let out a long, arduous breath before grinning and laughing. You're truly growing well, and I couldn't be more proud. Was it wrong to say he didn't feel embarrassed about crying and hugging his uncle? At the age of 23, he was hugging the man like his life depended on it. And Obaido reciprocated with a smile, giving him the head ruffles and praise he'd always wanted. Because he was on the way. He could become so strong. Item: Rasaka's Fang. Item Class C. Type: Dagger. Attack plus 25. Description: a dagger made from Rasaka's Fang. Able to paralyze due to leftover venom. Grants bleed effect. Can be equipped, stored, or sold. Effect Paralyze: attacked foes have a chance to become unable to move. Effect Bleed: attacked foes lose 1% of their health every second. Item: Rasaka's Venom. Item Class A. Description: a pouch that contains Rasaka's purified venom. Obtainable by defeating Rasaka. Unlikely drop rate. Drinking it will give you hardened skin but will weaken our strength. Effect Rasaka's Steel Scales, minus 20% physical damage taken. Debuff weakened muscles, minus 35 strength. Well, that's cool, Jinwoo smiled as he showed the new dagger to Obaido, explaining its effects. The man was utterly floored by another fact, though. Wait, the weapon I made gained a new effect? He asked, utterly confused. Actually, yeah, that one was actually weird, the younger man explained as he pulled one of his knives out from their holster and held it up with Rasaka's fang. Beast halter sounds good, Jinwoo nodded as Obaido sweat dropped. Also, I got a title. Right, we'll talk about it later. Wait, what? Alarm. The boss has been slain. The dungeon's interior will revert to normal. The area around them began to break down into squares before fading away. Obaido's eyebrows rose as a blue glow around him shimmered before breaking apart as they were left in a normal, well-lit, train passageway. Let's go. Walking out of the area and going up the steps to the next level, both became more and more confused as they noted no one. What? Jinwoo wondered as they walked up the last steps out of the station. What happened? I think something outside did, Obaido said before noticed a person coming up to them. Here we go. Sirs? The man fitted out in full military gear blinked at the duo, noting their attire, and then Obaido himself. It's you. He looked happy beyond imagination, confusing the duo. Wait, no, what happened? Obaido asked with a frown. Sir, there's been a dungeon break nearby. There was a rumble in the ground and both uncle and nephew's heads snapped to the side with narrowed eyes. At the small tower of magical power that reached towards the sky. Shushu. I know, we're going. Huh? Sirs, please let me lead you, the soldier began to say, saluting the duo. And quickly finding a pair of craters in front of him, no hunters in sight. What? Ju-hee grimaced as she healed another person, the giant glowing blue rock monster fending off the fighters and tanks who'd arrived on the scene with her at the last minute. We can't keep this up, she told a person beside her, hiding from the giant monster's gaze despite its lack of a face. It's just like that time, the healer swallowed as she rushed around. With the recent 2-year-long training sessions she joined in on for totally platonic reasons, she'd learned more evasive movements, gained more stamina, and learned how to sense more dangerous situations. Which all didn't help by the time she healed the 10th person and looked up by accident. And locked eyes with a terrifying grin full of malice. From that thing that looked like a god. She froze as her skin ashened. I can't, she couldn't move, even as she watched another person lose an arm. I can't, Ju-hee held her head as she quivered in fear. It's fine, a voice at her side said, startling her out of her terror. Ju-hee. She turned on a dime and locked eyes with a smiling Jin-woo who jumped and blushed as she slammed into him, head tucked beneath his chin. I can't. She trembled as his eyes widened before he was holding her close. I'm sorry, you're strong, I promise, he told her, holding her at arm's length so she could see his grin. And if you're ever scared. The world around them rained glowing blue rocks, neatly cut bits and pieces of the monster behind them. I've got you. The other hunter's jaws dropped as Obaido landed in front of them, the diced-up pieces of the golem-like monster falling around him while being deflected by random strings to not hit anyone else. Is everyone all right? He called out to the other gasping hunters or relieved-looking tanks. I guess the gate broke too suddenly, Obaido said, ignoring the numerous flashing cameras all around him as he jogged over to the relieved duo. Are you all right, Ju-hee? Yes, sir, the carrot top burning as Jin-woo looked down at her with a smile. When did he get handsome? It was startling to notice, but that was right. Maybe it was him maturing over the years, maybe a growth spurt hit, but looking at Jin-woo now? Her face burned bright red as he pat her shoulders with a chuckle and grin that sent her to the world of the unconscious. Whoa! Obaido facepalmed. Status. Name, Jin-woo level 14. Job, None Fatigue, 54. Title, None. HP 1708. MP 298. Strength 42, Vitality 31. Agility 48 plus 14 from Dagger Intelligence 26. Sense 29. Remaining points 0. The next day was spent explaining the whole situation to their familiar female guests. So, this is legitimate, Gina said with a flat expression, wearing a casual white shirt, black jeans, and socks as she held Rasaka's fang. Woo, I don't know what the hell to say besides, if you ever find stuff that's good for telekinesis magic, I'm your gal, she grinned as Obaido snorted in the kitchen in a tight black shirt and shorts. Jin-woo chuckled in his white shirt and gray pajama pants as Ju-hee muttered something next to him in a white dress and Jin-ah tilted her head in her training wear. So, how many of those have you gotten? Those instant keys? She asked, and he shook his head. Only that one? Literally only that one. I got 3 more bandages, another pen, and I think some special paper? He showed all the items, the paper being folded with nothing on it. I really do wonder what the hell is up with that box. Maybe it depends on your level, Ju-hee muttered as he cupped his chin. You're now level 15? 14, he corrected, showing Obaido's daggers, too. And that's not all. Uncle's daggers gained a new effect mid-fight with Risaka. I'm not sure why, and neither is he. They didn't have this beast eater effect originally. Maybe, Gina observed his knife before handing it back to him, leaning back in her seat with her hands crossed in her lap. Well, it's not like this changes too much, but what if it grows with your level? She offered as he put the knife away into thin air. God, that's weird. He chuckled at that. Well, I wonder what'll come out of that box next, Jinwoo said. And I need to go and make some more money, he added nervously. I can't keep borrowing Uncle's clothes. Thank God I was growing well into this, or else I'd cause a problem on the streets. Obaido's laughter got a blush out of him as Gina snickered along with him. Don't do what I wouldn't, Ryuchiya said as Jinwoo steamed and Ju-hee burned, Jin-ah shaking her head at the two. You guys don't hesitate, she chuckled. They went clothes shopping the next day, dressed the same as they'd been but with Jin-ah at school. The four hummed as they moved about in a clothing store. Well, you know he's got your kind of aesthetic, Gina said as she kept Obaido's arm in her hold as they looked around. Behind, Ju-hee looked at the yawning Jinwoo's loose arms with a blush before pinching the bottom of his sleeve. He shot her a sleepy look before shrugging. Maybe she'd want to show me specific things, the clueless man thought. Reaching a section for people of their height and width, Obaido nodded to Wu with a smile. All right, well, what kind of colors do you like besides black and blue? Obaido asked him as Gina and Ju-hee walked off to look at potential attire for him. And do so quickly, a woman's very quick to attack you with choices. Now more awake, Jinwoo rubbed the back of his head as he looked around. Crap. I liked my blue hoodie, a lot actually. And, well, black and gray? All right. We're back, Ju-hee declared as both men turned and began to nervously stare at the pile of clothes she'd brought. This might not be enough. It isn't? They thought in horrified unison as Gina came over with a good pair of stacks in her telekinetic hold. Oh God. Jinwoo was clearly not going to get out of this unclothed. The reawakened man muttered with red cheeks as Ju-hee walked robotically next to him, her face emblazoned. Gina hummed with some red cheeks of her own, eyes going to Obaido's abdomen. Man, when did you two get that fit? She asked her boyfriend with a shy gaze, the man running a hand through his hair before grasping her waist. Well, it's fit for our profession, Gina squeaked with red cheeks. How long have I been fighting next to that? It made her appalled at herself. She'd let this man walk around without a bit of possessiveness. I should put my points into agility this time, Jinwoo muttered even as he looked to the side at the bright red Ju-hee. Damn it, she touched me and I'm freaking out, he thought, mental Jinwoo losing his freaking mind right now. Hey, it was an accident, don't worry about it. All right, she squeaked, and he found it cute, but also found that it clashed with his own embarrassment. Why, you said you wanted to go do a gate for money. Let's do that, Ju-hee said, likely to just change the conversation. He welcomed it with open arms. Obaido brought the hammer down on the scale, breaking it apart with the 10th hit before he moved it into a large stone bucket. Jong-in nodded to him as he held out his hands and flames formed at the tips before shooting out and covering the bucket completely after Obaido put it down. Thanks, Jong-in, he said to his former student, stretching in only a pair of dark brown pants. I'm reaching a point I didn't expect. They have effects. It was true. Jong-in knew it as nothing else. His teacher had stepped into the realm of smithing that many vied for outside of most high-rank healers. Yes, that ring you made me, the redhead began as he looked at his right pointer finger where a red furred stone accessory sat. It's doing its work, he clenched his hands. With more materials, a hunter could do many things. Sell them, trade them, or even have a smith make something. And now Obaido was working to fill that role. After the amount of reading you've been doing, I'm not surprised by the amount of speed you're progressing at, Jong-in said as Obaido nodded. I'm sure Hee-in will enjoy her new mantle when she gets back, he chuckled as the older man smirked. How much effectiveness has your ring made? By the way, that fire boar wasn't that great at using magic, but it could passively. If I had to guess, he took it off and closed his eyes, focusing on his internals. A moment later, he put the accessory back on and nodded. 5%, he said, Obito cupping his chin. It's better than the focus all of my other silver rings. To be fair, those gave me 3% per piece. Now, we're working on upping that. You've net me a 16% bonus. Thank you, Hyung. Always. Now, Obito looked at the 10 melted buckets with a nod. Let's get to work. Gina leaned down on her knees as she wiped her chin, he in looking interested in her state. The giant frog boss with crystal eyes and fins hit the ground with a wet thud, dead, as the others hurried in and handled the rest of the mobs around them. You're getting faster, Gina, the younger woman said as the mixed blood leaned back up and sighed in relief, the 4 black bands around her fingers dimming. You and Hyung Nim truly show how versatile a mage's power is. To be fair, Gina crossed her arms as they both looked at the battle around them. It's really luck of the draw, I think. I lucked out with telekinesis. Yet, every nation-ranked hunter can use my same level, at least somewhat. Maybe before nowadays, yes. I'm glad, ma'am, really I am, but I'm left wondering what else I can do. He uncupped her chin at that, the monsters around them dying to their comrades. Have you considered enhancing your sash? She asked. The currently floating belt shot back around the taller blonde's waist. It's nothing but hard cloth, correct? Why not find a better one? I want Obai to make one, Gina admitted bashfully as he smiled brightly. He's working hard, too, to keep upping his skill set. I want him to make it. So, for now, I've got to get better at keeping my body moving. I actually began reading some medical books on my muscles, if you'd believe it. Wait, that's what caused your explosive growth? The S-rank asked in shock as the A-rank grinned. It's been a big help, especially because Jin Oz helped me understand it more. I've got as much spell mastery as I can. Now, I've got to build my body. Jin nodded to her anthropology book before making notes. There's got to be something in the brain. Maybe, she thought as her friends sat around her, I just need to find it. Maybe something to jumpstart her mom's mental activity. She'd already been sharing ideas with Gina and Obito, and they'd been rather impressed and supportive to the point that the man had made a whole new training method out of it. She wanted to make sure that support wasn't wasted. A day later, Obito and Jin Woo sat in the former's room. He revealed everything that had occurred in his small trip to make money from a C-rank gate. I want you to know, I don't blame you for what you had to do, Obito said as Jin Woo let out a nearly unnoticeable sigh. You've been worried for a while, he felt for him. He did. And, compared to a normal person, even with hunter power, Obito was simply a different beast comparatively. He'd been a shinobi. He'd killed more people than Jin Woo would likely ever come close to. He had no right to blame him for killing to protect, mostly himself. 8 bodies, how do you feel? I tried to rationalize it, Jin Woo said as he gripped his knees with a frown and grimace. The system made me do it. I was worried for Ju Hee and Jin Ho. I wasn't that strong. He was an elite C rank. I didn't want to die and was already injured. I had to kill them. He rattled off each excuse as another tear fell from his eye, Obito pulling the now similar-heighted man into a one-arm hug. In the end, you killed people, Obito said. You will live with it your entire life, but never let it control you, he added as his nephew let out a shuddering breath. I've killed people before, Jin Woo, before I came here to Korea. The man's eyes widened before they snapped to Obito's solemn expression. Your mother never told you, and for good reason, but we're not from a normal family. Not so much us but 2 men in our family, the Uchiha frowned. Our grandfather and father became part of the Chinese mafia around when we were born. It was around the age of 10 that we were separated. She'd left with our mother and I stayed with our father. For good reason as grandfather sought an heir, Obito's eyes narrowed. You never became it, Jin Woo said with all his heart. No, I didn't. I'd never become that kind of man, not again. But I had to play the game, Woo. I had to live a long life of horrid miseries to reach the point where I could kill them. All of the heads of that family, and even my own father, Jin Woo bit his lip. This was around 2 years after people had awakened. I'd had the power, know-how, and ability to stop the biggest problem in China's recent history. I did it, I killed them, and I'll never forget it. He gripped him in a similar embrace. I will never cast judgment upon you for that. I've done the same thing and killed more people than I hope you ever have to. I believe in you and your sister's choices no matter what, even if I'm confused sometimes. So, I understand and I trust you. Just don't let killing rule your life. I had to spend a long time figuring that out myself. They let go with one shared breath before Jin Woo nodded, explaining to him his levels, new skills, and his new potential for them. This young man, Jin Ho, wants us to help him clear 19 C rank raids. Yeah, he promised me a 30 billion one building and 3 million for each raid like all the other fillers. For us, that'd be 6 million each time. Obaido could see what he'd meant as Jin Woo explained the entire situation. So, he wants to gain experience, huh? He wore a nostalgic smile. Alright, I might not be able to make it every time, obviously, so have someone on standby. That said, I think I can impart some knowledge to this young man. Jin Woo raised a brow at that. Oh, also, Jin Ah and I were training, and I figured out more about the daily quest system. I can overdo it, he told Obaido, who blinked. And then he showed him the S-rank key item. Item, Demon Castle's key. Item class S. Description, a key that can be used to enter the Demon Tower. Can be used at Song Pagu Tower. Standing before Song Pagu Tower, the two looked at it from a nearby building. Wearing some new Obaido-made combat wear of a black coat, an opened one in Jin Woo's case, baggy dark blue pants, and a pair of special boots he'd made, they jumped off and landed without issue. Item, Song Sung Boots. Item class, C. Class, Boots. Minus 5% physical damage taken. Effect Song of the Wind, silences sounds. They landed without an issue, the two looking around at the thankfully empty streets. Obaido's Sharingan spun to life. Do it, he said, giving the go-ahead. Jin Woo nodded as he held up the Demon Castle key. The air glowed red with its turning, the sound of something unlocking reaching even Obaido's ears. Wait, that doesn't seem right. He'd never heard anything the first time Jin Woo had done this. Watching that oddly more visible large flame orange gate open up some more, his eyes flickered unknowingly as Jin Woo went in. Standing by the instant gate, Obaido clenched his hands as he performed that same song and dance from last time. The red fought against his blue power, the threads snapping repeated as he tried to maintain the portal. This is a lot more difficult, he grunted at the feeling of the gate's energy fighting against his own. But it doesn't matter. Both his eyes spun, blue energy forming over him in a higher amount before his small rip in dimensions began to stabilize. By the time it did, his actions were unnecessary. All he got to show for it was a 4-foot-tall portal floating in front of him. Uncle, you might want to come in here. Well, no time like the present. Just jumping through the portal like a trapeze artist, Obaido landed on the other side of Were They in Hell. Looking up and around at their arid, on fire, surroundings, the broken-down ruins in the distance, and the literal giant gate in front of them, Obaido's attention was taken away from all of it by a single being. A single 3-headed dog the size of a 4-story apartment with dark red fur, flame-like manes, pure red eyes, and long horns with metal plating between their foreheads. Looking more at it, the amount of magical power coming from this creature caused some beads of sweat to fall down their faces. Hell's Gatekeeper, Cerberus. Yeah, this might be a good idea to tell me where I'm at, Jin Woo said, pulling out one of his beast halters and Risaka's fang, the pair his usual favored pair. With title, Wolf Slayer in effect and Beast Eater, I should have a 60% increase against beast-like monsters. Obaido, meanwhile, let out a breath as the ground beneath his feet was filled with a rapid swirl of invisible wind. An S-rank item, was it the same? Are they the same strength as a normal S-rank gate? Jin Woo unknowingly continued the thought. Or is it different? What if it's weaker? Can I compare? One thing's for sure. Blue aura spilled from the duo's bodies. I want to find out. They vanished in flashes of blue. Lightning-like blurs of a similar hue flashes across this beast's napes and chest. Jin Woo noted the wounds he could leave with interest, his body crossing with his uncle's in a flash of sparks as they slashed at the hellish canine's shoulders. A bit of blood spilled as it shot onto its hind legs, both brunettes landing on the large gate's surface. "It's tough," Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. "Remove its movement," Obaido's Sharingan glowed. They shot off the door at the beast with a pair of kicks that slammed into its chest, the creature stumbling before two of its heads snapped out at the two. Obaido kicked his nephew away before he was shooting around the chomping jaws in an impossible aerial display that ended with his foot slamming into the top of its center head. It trembled for a moment before shaking him off and trying to bite the man, only for a knife-wielding comet to slam into its chin. "Go down, you bastard!" Jinwoo kept slashing at its chin, trying to enact paralyze. When it seemingly took place, it broke, the screen shouting at him that this beast was too resistant. "Tisk," he shot back from the beast's other head's jaws, landing beside a similarly landing Obaido. "If a monster's strength is too high, it can resist status effects." "It's doing something," Obaido grimaced as Jinwoo paled a bit. "Hell's Keeper, Cerberus is using skill, Wrath. Wrath lasts for 3 minutes. Cerberus's stats will be doubled." "So, bad news." "Its aura just doubled." "Yeah, I know." The two lunged apart in alarm, eyes wide at Cerberus's speed. Was it so great? Obaido wondered with a look of horror before it lunged at him. Tesk. He lunged onto its third head's snout before his arms became covered by tight black material. Naisenko. The dual palm thrust slammed into the center head's neck side, electricity sparking away from the head rumbling force as Jinwoo came in from above, blades slamming into the back of its neck before he lunged around it at high speeds. The dual attack brought the head off with a squelching pop. "Keep moving," Jinwoo tried to say, only for a pair of jaws to grab the back of his coat. "What?" He was flung across the expanse of a far-off ruin, going through the wreckage, rocks, and old structures before tumbling into a rock formation with a torn coat. The pain was hilariously high, stunning his mind for a moment as a large shadow came into view above him. "Oh, he began to say, only for a glowing blue figure to slam into Cerberus's side, getting a relieved sigh out of the player. Because the monster was sent flying into the ground beside the ruin, tossing up sand, dust, and pebbles that were blocked by the landing black figure's numerous cutting threads. When Jinwoo saw him, his eyes widened at the figure's raised finger and shaking head, his system failing to categorize him. "Let's finish this. I can't keep this up for more than a minute." The younger man realized that, really? He hadn't seen the depths of his uncle's power, not even close. He grinned as he slowly sat up, body hissing at him before he accepted his first daily quest reward. Status recovery. A familiar golden glow sprung up around him before Jinwoo stood up while letting out a breath. "All right," his knives settled in his hands, his grip tighter. "Let's take another shot at this." They shot forward at high speeds. "Ha ha," Jinwoo groaned a bit as he rolled his shoulder, his sleeves missing. "Damn it, my clothes do not like staying unripped." Obaido chuckled beside him, outfit only having a couple cuts. "It's about the experience. Speaking of," he trailed off. "I got 4 level ups. Status. Name, Jinwoo level 22. Job, none fatigue 0. Title, none. HP, 3105. MP, 401. Strength, 61 vitality, 39. Agility, 59 plus 14 from dagger intelligence, 34. Sense, 43. Remaining points, 3. Telling his uncle his next move, Jinwoo put 1 more point in vitality and 2 more in sense, evening them out to 40 and 45, respectively. "And the items you got?" Obaido asked him, noting the necklace, key, and fang he'd received. Item, Warden's Necklace. Item class A. Type, necklace. Agility plus 20 cents plus 20. Item, castle door key. Item class A. Type, key. Description, a key that can open the demon castle's door, obtained by killing the gatekeeper. Item, Cerberus Fang. Item class A. Type, material. Description, a fang that can be obtained by slaying Cerberus. "Oh, that's just useful," Obaido chuckled as Jinwoo put on the necklace while pocketing the key. Smart. His eyes went to the door before he let out a breath. That was just the guard. We don't know if it was even an S rank or just an elite A rank. It's crazy how strong some monsters are, Jinwoo understood as he put away his knives. But it means there's power for me to find. The system has to be pushing me towards this, and that has to mean something. Hopefully only good things. Obaido worried about the mechanic's wants and needs. I'm sure. Now, come on, let's go, he said as Jinwoo pulled a stone from his pocket, a returning crystal. Oh, wait, this will be interesting, he said as he walked to the normal gates opening before taking a deep breath. One moment. Jinwoo perked up, watching how Obaido got into these odd dimensions that only he had a key to, surprised by the man's power allowing him the ability to get in and out. Obaido, meanwhile, raised a brow as he formed a way out. That was easier than getting in, even when he'd done this to a C-rank gate in the past. He'd never had it so easy. Maybe there's a change due to us beating the gatekeeper. For now, they had to go home. Drinking with Obaido in the Sung living room, the Sung siblings already asleep. Gina leaned into his side in some red pajamas as he chuckled in his black ones. They clinked their beers before drinking from them, the man's hand clasping her waist well as she moved into his lap. She turned and pressed her lips to his, and he secured his arm around her as he deepened it. Moaning for a bit, they separated with a chuckle, foreheads pressed together. Nothing like a drink and kiss after a rough day, the woman said as she laid against his chest, the two just sitting there. How was the instant dungeon? Hell on earth, the man said as she laughed a bit. It was S-rank, and just the gatekeeper outside the real dungeon was a problem in and of itself. I had to pull out one horned oni for it, Obaido said, confusing her as she sat up in his lap. One horned oni? It's the culmination of my magic skill. Gina perked up at an idea. Wait, yeah, that's it, she grinned, leaning back in his lap. And getting a grunt out of him, Gina jumping in shock at a feeling below her rear. She burned up as Obaido looked away with a nervous smile. You've hit the right spot, he admitted sheepishly as the half-American's free hand settled on his chest, her shifting in his lap getting another grunt out of her boyfriend. Are you suggesting something, Gina? Obaido warned as he pulled her in close, his chin atop her breasts. Just wow. Don't you dare, Gina placed a finger to his lips with a red-faced pout. Pervert, she muttered with a 10 score. We've never really talked about that kind of thing, have we? She asked, removing her finger. Obaido hummed, eyes locked with his girlfriend for a time before he shrugged. I never really brought it up. We were dating, you were happy, and we were both working. I was fine with that, he admitted as she nodded. Besides, with all this new business, it's been hard to think about it outside of when you're wearing workout clothes. Gina squinted at him before pressing her lips to his, Obaido adjusting her in his lip before pressing up. Chest to chest, Gina moaned into it as Obaido's free hand slid down and gripped her rear with a growing want. I do want us to reach that stage now, though. I'm blaming you for that, you beautiful woman. She blushed and chuckled, grasping his cheek. And you make me feel so many things, you handsome man. Like a couple days ago, how dare you look sexy in just pants and gloves? How have I not seen you in that kind of clothing yet? That was clothing? It's close enough. Obaido chuckled at her knowing look. Look, since we're clearly both on board with the idea, how about this? He began with a smile. We'll both request a week off in a month's time and do it then, all right? I'd love to, she smiled, arms around his neck. Still, I hope nothing else crazy happens, you know? Gina pouted again as he wore a nervous smile. Honey, every week something else seems to be happening. I know, it's weird, but we can hope for the best. Definitely. Oh, how about we save up some money and go on a trip? Oh, we can go to Florida and see the sick oceans. It's so much better with superpowers to clean it up and the ocean's so blue. He chuckled, pecking her on the lips. Sounds grand. Jong-in smiled knowingly as he-in blushed knowingly the following morning. Gina's cheeks colored as Obaido smiled shakily at the S-rank fighter's look of embarrassment and understanding. You two are going to, he-in almost shrieked. Easy, easy, let's not out our experienced mages like that, please, Cha-he-in, Jong-in said immediately, stopping the blushing woman from causing a scene. I'm sorry, it's, she looked so shy. Gee, good luck, she said quietly. Obito chuckled as he held Gina's shoulder, her his waist. Well, that's the plan. So, in that time, I'm going to do more gates as a fighter than clean up crew, Jong-in. Understood, glad to have you, the S-rank mage smiled. It was only 2 days later that Jinwoo and Ju-hee explained the situation with this D-rank dungeon. What the hell is with you two's luck? Gina asked in sheer disbelief as the two younger adults grew bashful or sheepish, Ju-hee and Jinwoo, respectively. Jesus, are you guys all right? Jinwoo handled it, the healer admitted as the reawakened let out a breath. Not without your help, he told her, Ju-hee biting her lip. I needed you, don't forget that. Fighting the Cerberus had been so different. He'd been sure he was greater than a B-rank hunter. No, he'd also had a 60% bonus to his attacks, and his uncle had been there, right? So, how had he struggled for so long with Ju-hee's help before using Bloodlust? He needed more strength. Actually, the young man said with a frown, do you remember that monitoring guy from when I woke up? Wu Jin-chul, Obito asked, getting a nod. What about him? He told me some things I'm not happy with. You don't know, Nuna, he said to Gina only to blink as she shook her head, Ju-hee looking embarrassed. No, Ju-hee gave me the specifics. It's better that you guys ran out of there when you can. Fuck those guys, Gina said, seeing the relief on Jinwoo's face. I'll let him know, I know. Another day, Ju-hee had told her everything. The deaths, the trap, the lizarding, all of it. Gina had been pissed, but knowing that Huang Dong-suk was dead made her temper cool. She knew Jinwoo had taken a life, but she'd let him accept it more before revealing that. All right, Nuna, well, his younger brother, you know who he is, right? F me, I don't like that you brought him up. Obito's eyes narrowed at that, leaning forward in his seat with his hands steepled by his mouth. He's made a threat, hasn't he? He asked with a single unleashed breath. And the air vibrated like a thrumming string, the area's color seemingly tinting. Jinwoo's eyes widened as they snapped to his uncle. Wait, his aura is rising, and not in a small amount either. No, his uncle seemed scarier than Jin-chul's aura was. Gina placed a hand on Obito's knee and he sighed, his aura relinquished in an instant. Yet, that didn't stop the younger adults from gawking at its disappearance. I'm sorry, that was unbecoming of me, Obito told them. Wu, tell me everything I need to know. Jinwoo considered him for a moment before nodding. He told me that Huang Dong-su might be coming down here to start something. The reawakened's eyes glittered with intrigue. I knew he was still more powerful than me, by a long shot. Obito's speed and skill outstripped his own by a good bit when the man was going almost all out, a shocking yet enlightening fact he kept close to his heart, while the Uchiha could increase his power beyond anything Jinwoo could hope to muster. The man before him was beyond his level, and likely was the biggest threat outside of an S-rank. He didn't give me much else, but those are all the facts I know, he said as Ju-hee swallowed, concerned beyond belief. Uncle, I'm well aware of where you stand, and I won't let that come to face you without trying to kill it myself, Obito said with a grunt. If I'm going to deter this man, I need to research him a lot. I'm sure of my skills, but... The Uchiha's eyes went down to his hand. I can't go against an S-rank like an idiot. It might be time for me to finally go and get a weapon. All eyes widened at that as Obito clenched his fist. What kind of weapon do you prefer, Uncle? Jinwoo asked with a focused gaze. Can I get strong enough to fight off an S-rank in the time it'd take? He didn't know. Painful as it was to admit, he didn't see that being possible. He was level 25 and he'd had some difficulty with a B rank. The ranks weren't just for show and the leap between A and B might have not been that crazy. But the jump to S rank wasn't something he could even try to put into numbers. It was simply not possible to say they're 10 times in a rank without looking like an idiot. Especially with the man known to be the strongest Korean's rank. Damn it, he grimaced. And what will I do if he has equipment, too? That'd bring a whole different kind of mess to this fight. Damn it. Obito considered him for a moment before looking at his own hands. Pride isn't important here, Obito thought to himself. I'm someone who prefers chains and a scythe. I haven't used a weapon in so long, but I'm in need of fast ones. So, instead of a chain and sickle, what I need are 2 sickles. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. The question is just finding it in time, he said. I'm sure I could buy you a pair from the store. Maybe? He opened up his menu before checking. A scythe or sickles as he looked. His eyes narrowed at the 400 million gold scythe he'd found before scoffing. They can go that high? That's useless with my sad funds, he frowned. As he kept checking, frown deepening each time, Gina shot Obaido a worried look that was well justified. Obaido gripped her hand in his with a focused gaze, putting something in her palm as he did. I'm not going to die on anyone, much less them, much less you, he said as he held her hands solidly with a secure grip. A small flickering of the finger and thread going unseen by anyone but Jin Woo. I hope this is a good way of showing that. The younger man's jaw had already dropped before he'd revealed the ring on Gina's finger. Ju Hee's eyes widened before she covered her mouth in shock and awe. The telekinetic mage's eyes mechanically went down to the golden band on her finger that was covered in Korean inscriptions with the phrase I love you on it. You understand, if you even faint, I'm coming to the afterlife to kill you, all right? She trembled a bit as Obaido pulled her in close. I love you, you idiot. I know, I love you, too. And that's more than enough reason to do this, Obaido declared with his hug. Eyes narrowed as they went to Jin Woo. Woo, instead of looking to buy one, he nodded. Give me material and I'll make one. The following day, Obaido sat in Jong-in's office, the younger man's eyes narrowed on his desk. Hyung, he whispered. Are you sure about this? Yes, amongst all else, Obaido said with a protective gleam in his eye. He's the strongest this rank from Korea. Jong, I can't take him lightly, nor will I allow that meathead to think he can try and run up on my family and not suffer for it. Not just Jin Woo, Jin Ah, or Gina. You're also at risk along with our guild. Jong-in's eyes darkened at that. He'd find nothing but his own blood here if he tried. Exactly. I won't let him even think he can get that far. That's also why I need materials. I'll give you a quarter of our inventory, Jong-in said with a worried frown. Hyung, please, don't die. I won't, Obaido told him gently. I proposed to Gina, by the way. The redhead looked startled. If possible, would you mind us doing it here? Please, this is our home. I'd be remiss to not want to witness this. I'd also want you and Jin Woo as my best men.